Okay, good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our special joint City Council Successor Agency Board meeting and the Public Financing Authority meeting as well for October 17th, 2016. I'd like a roll call, please. City Clerk von der Linden.
Councilmember Aguirre.
Present.
Councilmember Borgens.
Here.
Councilmember G.
Here.
Councilmember Howard.
Here.
Councilmember Mazer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bain.
Here.
Mayor Siebert.
Here.
Thank you.
With that, I would like to ask Vice Mayor Bain to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise, please. I'm going to be heading over to the podium over here, and I'm actually going to ask Vice Mayor Bain to accompany me there for a special order of the day. So our special order of the day today is put on in conjunction with Redwood City 2020, and I'd like to ask Maddie Kane, who is here today from Redwood City 2020, to please join me at the podium. Tonight, the Welcoming Star is something that Redwood City 2020 has been doing as an award, and tonight they will be honoring Kainos Home and Training Center. And so I'd also like to ask Executive Director Andy Frisch to make his way to the stage. And as they're coming up, I asked a very special guest, Vice Mayor Bain, who is a former employee at Kainos and promises to tell us some really good stories about Andy. So sit back, take some. No, he actually said he wouldn't, but he could later. So with that, I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Bain to share a few thoughts about Kainos.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. So as the mayor mentioned, I've been familiar with Kainos for a very long time, 27 years to be exact, and Andy's been there the whole time, and I see many of my friends here from Kainos. I know Thurman's been there since the very beginning. For those of you who don't know about Kainos, I just want to give you a few little facts about this. It was founded in 1974 and serving Redwood City since 1977 and North Fair Oaks since 1983. Kainos Home and Training Center is a nonprofit that serves adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Their mission is to enable each individual they serve to maximize his or her potential while becoming active and contributing members of the community. Kainos offers a range of residential, vocational, senior day programs. Their residential program include providing housing to support over 70 individuals as well as a senior care facility. The vocational programs are geared to help individuals gain or develop skills for competitive employment in the community. The Senior Day program provides opportunities for education, socialization, recreation, and community inclusion, and integration for older adults with developmental disabilities. By supporting these individuals and active parts of our community, Kainos ensures Redwood City and North Fair Oaks become more inclusive, enriched, and caring. In addition to partnering with the community-based organizations, the Sienna Youth Center engages the youth's parents of the Parent Action Team, where parents are supported by the leaders of the Sienna Youth Center and the broader community. For this meaningful work of inclusion, care, and commitment, it is my pleasure and the City Council's pleasure to recognize Kainos and the Training Center by presenting the Certificate of Recognition to Andy Frisch, the Executive Director. And I would just like to, on a personal note, note that Kainos is really one of the organizations that made me fall in love with this community. The way that our community embraces people of all ability levels and looks after each other was one of the things that made me feel that I wanted to live here in Redwood City permanently and make a difference in the community myself. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Andy.
Official certificate of recognition to Kainos Home and Training Center for all the incredible things that Vice Mayor Bain talked about. But again, thank you. You're a welcoming star, a shining star, a model for a number of organizations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Could I introduce our board president, Barbara Rovens?
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Kainos staff, the clients, and the board of directors, we are honored and thrilled to accept this Welcoming Star Award. Thank you very much.
And we greatly appreciate the recognition, but more importantly, we appreciate all the partnerships we have in the community. We work closely with Parks and Rec. We work closely with the YMCA that's partnering with Parks and Rec. We've had a wonderful partnership with our local Chamber of Commerce, with the Downtown Business Group, with the local Rotary clubs, with a lot of service organizations. And I feel that those partnerships have helped to integrate us more tightly into the community. But ultimately, our thanks goes to the members of the community who've embraced our clients, who have accepted them as neighbors, as friends, as employees. Just this past year, a couple of longtime wonderful volunteers at Kainos called me up and let me know they wouldn't be able to work with Kainos too much in the future for good reasons. But their friendship with our clients remains strong. And although that's a bit bittersweet, it shows ultimately our success. What we're about is getting our clients integrated into the community, and Redwood City has just been a wonderful partner in each and every way, embracing us, our clients, our challenges, and our achievements, and we're so grateful for that. We hope that we've been able to contribute back. I know that we've raised the fun quotient when we're out in the community, whether it's at a cleanup or working with Pride and Beautification, and I hope we've contributed in making Redwood City an even more caring and welcoming community. So thank you so very much for everything.
On behalf of Redwood City 2020 and our Executive Director, Jana Kaiser, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, I just want to briefly say that we are incredibly thrilled to give a welcoming star to such a deserving and incredible organization. Briefly, Redwood City 2020, for those of you who may not know, is a community collaborative here in Redwood City and North Fair Oaks, comprised of 8 nonprofit and public core member organizations and hundreds of community-based affiliate organizations, all working together to ensure that all people living in Redwood City, North Fair Oaks, are healthy, safe, and successful. Now, we give this award as part of our welcoming initiative called Redwood City Together, which seeks to build empathy and understanding across the community and foster a more welcoming environment for all. This Welcoming Star Award recognizes programs in the Redwood City and North Fair Oaks community that create a welcoming environment, and there really is no better example of creating a welcoming community for all members of our community than Kainos, so we are just absolutely delighted to be here today, and thank you all for your time.
Excuse me, Mayor Siebert. I know members of the Kainos community are here, and they were hoping they'd be able to get a picture together with all of us, with Andy as the center star.
But also, while they're coming up, don't you have an event, a fundraising event coming up soon?
I think you should speak about
that. Tuesday, October 25th, the fashion show.
Okay, moving on to public comment. I do not have any speaker's card, but I do have one speaker's card on a consent item. So we call those during this time as well. So I would like to call Hal Drager from the Senior Affairs Commission to the podium.
I just want to draw your attention to the beaming faces of those who are on the Senior Affairs Commission, that this item has hit the agenda, the consent agenda. Some of us have been on the commission for, I was asking Barbara how long we've been there, and she said, I think it's 9 years. And it's been a topic of great interest at every one of those gatherings that we have had on a monthly basis for those 9 years. So we are really pleased to see us at this place. It's a significant step forward toward bringing together people of all along the age continuum, the young and the old, when we have the Seniors Center as well as the YMCA. We see this as a wonderful collaborative, and we're just thrilled that you council members have partnered with this project, and we're excited to see this yay vote tonight.
Thank you, Hal. With that, I would accept a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Excuse me, Mayor Siebert.
Yes.
I need to recuse myself from the very item that was just spoken about, the agreement with the City of Redwood City and the YMCA, as I'm currently serving as a volunteer board of directors with the YMCA, so I'll step out for that vote.
Great. So the consent item, I'm sorry that I missed that. I had forgotten that, and that is why you are also not on our committee. So this would be everything except item 6.1G. So assume that's okay with the maker of the motion and the second? Okay. So with that, we have a vote on everything except item 6.1G. Wait, this is on everything except.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
7-0. I don't think you need to leave the dais for consent.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 6.1G on the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on 6.1G.
Motion carries 6-1 with Councilmember Howard abstaining and recused. Thank you.
Thank you. On the consent calendar with one vote, we're actually with two votes. We just approved a series of items. I'll read the summaries of those. The professional services agreement with PlaceWorks for environmental consulting services, amendment to an agreement with Maximus Consulting Services for financial consulting services, agreement for electrical maintenance services for 2016-17 with Cal West Lighting, landscape maintenance agreement, fiscal year 2016-17 agreement, service between Redwood City School District and the City of Redwood City for the PE Plus program, memorandum of understanding for fiscal year 16-17 between Sequoia Healthcare District and the City of Redwood City for the PE Plus program, agreement for professional services agreement with David J. Powers for the preparation of an EIR in accordance with CEQA for the Veterans Memorial Senior Center YMCA joint project. Very excited that is taking that step. I've been on that committee since the beginning, and I can't wait till we break ground on it, actually. The donation of 2 surplus vehicles to sister cities. Another great example of how Redwood City continues to interact with our sister cities, and in this case provide our sister cities in Mexico, Colima and Guzman, with a 2003 Ford passenger van and a Ford F-450 truck. I just think it's a great way that we are using our resources to help others. Disposal of city surplus personal property, advanced metering infrastructure software services agreement with Census, amendment number 4 to the agreement with management partners, approval of draft meeting minutes for the closed session and regular meeting held on September 12th, final acceptance of Broadway improvements for removing of the island and reconfiguring the roadway. It looks great. I came through there yesterday. Final acceptance of Main and Marshall 601 Main Street. Resolution approving the temporary street closures for the 2016 October Run event. Approval of the updated revised conflict of interest code for the City of Redwood City Successor Agency and the Oversight Board. Resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the purchase and sale of a remnant property with Butler Realty, LLC. And approved claims and checks dated October 17th and the usual necessary payments through October 24th. That concludes the reading of the summary of the consent calendar. And with that, we will move into our first public hearing, which is item 7A, to rescind ordinance number 2062 enacted in August 1993 regarding water conservation, water use prohibitions, and penalties. This item was continued from September 12th, and I believe, there he is, TK, or Terrence Cobb, our Assistant Public Works Director, will present a brief staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Terrence Cho, your Assistant Public Works Director. I'm here tonight to present about our water shortage contingency plan. This water shortage contingency plan is already in our 2015 urban water management plan, which is Council adopted in June of 2016. But the state water code requires the water supplier has to take this water shortage contingency plan to a governing body to either adopt it by the resolution or an ordinance. Staff are proposing adopt it as a resolution. The reason being is that state is ever changing the water restriction, and with the resolution we will be able to adopt it rather quickly. At the same time, we have a 1993 water shortage plan that adopted by the council that over 20-something years old, and it's not in line with the current state regulation that need to be adjusted. So all of the ordinance will be replaced with the new resolution. The water shortage contingency plan. This plan is, as I mentioned, part of the urban water management plan, and when we draft this plan, we evaluate the different water shortage contingency condition. Because due to the 2015 drought season, we learned a lot. So we identify the action to achieve the water saving. Also, we benchmark our action against what we learned in the drought. So new water shortage contingency plan will have 5 different stages of the action that we need to take in based on the requirement we need to comply to. Part of the guiding principle we focus on is outdoor potable water use. We believe that outdoor potable water use is the best area that we can take advantage upon. And our reduction are not based on the historical use, actual need. Talking about water saving, I want to touch on how Redwood City community are saving water. In 2015, State of California mandated Redwood City to reduce 8% of our 2013 water usage, which is translated to 275 million gallons for Redwood City to conserve in 2015. Actually, the community stepped up and saved water 767 million gallons. We are almost triple the state requirement. This year, in the 2016, from January to September, we are saving about 533 million gallons. I can confidently say that we are a very water efficient community. So compared with what we're doing with the entire state, as you look at the entire state, individual water usage is about 105 gallons of water per day. In Redwood City, we're using about 59 gallons per day. We look through the household usage. We divided into 3 different categories: single-family traditional home, traditional multifamily, and also we look into the downtown multifamily home that newly built. As you see, the single-family residents, we projected in our urban water management plan, downtown precise plan, general plan, we focus is about 264 gallons per household that they will be using. But in actual, the residents are only use 221 gallons, which is about 40 gallons a day less. Same goes to the traditional multifamily home. They're saving about somewhere around 40 gallons less than we projected. Let's go for the downtown multifamily dwelling that we look into. We projected about 132 gallons per household use. In reality, they use about 78 gallons per day and save about 50-something gallons every day. Along with the water shortage contingency plan, we also include the water conservation plan. In 2015, Governor imposes water usage restriction. Some of those you may remember that not to water the lawn within the 48 hour or the measurable rain, not to wash your vehicle without the auto shut-off nozzle, and things like that will stay. Because the beginning of the 2016, Governor Brown imposed that some of those restrictions need to be stay in the book for the Californian. So part of that program, we are including in our water conservation plan those regulations. Finally, I want to touch on the future planning. When we developed the 2015 urban water management plan, we focused all the way up to 2040. The good news is we have enough water. As you look at it, our projection here, even we are way under our allocation at the current stage. Even though accounting for the new development, we will have enough water until 2040. Our recycled water program is greatly contributed for our water usage also. The new development, each and every new development, at the beginning of the planning stage, what we do is like water supply assessment to make sure that new development will have enough water that will be able to supply. Finally, our water shortage contingency plan is also include the new development that coming along the pipeline. That pretty much concludes my presentation, and I'm here to answer any question that you might have. Thank you. Yes.
Councilwoman Howard.
Thank you for your presentation. I was going to ask you, what are some of the programs that you are finding wildly successful that people are really latching on to for water conservation?
Yes, so usually we have a Long Be Gone program. Is a successful program. Our washer and dryer, washer replacement program is a pretty successful program. And then lastly, the recycled water giveaway program that's very successful for the water conservation.
Well, I commend the people of Redwood City. The fact that we're about half of what the state of California is speaks to the seriousness that people in the community have taken this, that they are conserving, they're trying to take advantage of programs like this. And thank you to our staff for providing those programs and staying on top of the newest ways to incentivize people to save water. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Borgens.
Yeah. I just have one question, and that would be on page 6 of 11, and that's on the Exhibit A. So under the Stage 4 water shortage on number E, it said moratorium on new water connections. Is that new developments?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we got to a Stage 4 water shortage, we would have a stop on
the new development.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember G.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. And TK, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Howard's question, and this is probably more for the Utilities Committee as they look forward. I think the focus is correct to focus on outdoor landscape irrigation. That is the most consumptive water use. And I was curious, and this doesn't get answered today, but if there's a market to convert more lawns if the rebate was higher to incentivize getting rid of natural grass and going to more native landscape. I think I can't remember exactly what the rebate is. It's a nominal rebate, but if it was to go up,
right,
I'd be interested to whether it's a market study or some informal analysis to see if that would really accelerate the conversion of lawns into some more natural landscapes that use less water.
Definitely look into it.
Councilman Mazur.
Just to add on to that, well, first of all, I just took advantage of the Long Be Gone program, so it was great, and great service by the city staff, so really want to commend them for their quick response. But I do think that on some of the things like the toilet conversions and the washer and dryer and stuff, it may just be me, but I don't know that it's completely clear that we're continuing to offer those things. Because when I first read about them, it seemed like there was an end date. So if there's a way to continue to make sure that people understand that it's still possible to take advantage of some of those programs. And it is a nominal, but it does make a difference. So I like the idea, though, of thinking about could we do a better job of incentivizing people.
Definitely. Yep. Okay. With that, this is a public... Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you, I don't know if you mentioned, I was looking, did you mention how many percentage or how many households have taken advantage of the Long Be Gone program?
I don't have a exact number. I can get it for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing, although I have no speakers cards present. Move to close. I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Be interested in a motion to move this forward. Motion and a second to, I believe it's to waive the first reading and introduce an ordinance rescinding ordinance number 2062. Electronic vote, please.
Mayor Siebert, I just want to clarify, was the motion on all of the agenda items to move the ordinance as well as the resolution, or are you separating?
That's what I heard the motion maker say when they said so moved. That was a joke.
Thank you. So can I get clarification from the mover in the second?
Yes, that was the motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
They just read really fast. Moving on to item number 8, item number 8A, an ordinance amending Municipal Code Section 2.27.6 for an adjustment to the City of Redwood City elections to adhere to the California Voter Participation Rights Act, which is known casually as Senate Bill or SB 415. I just want to, as we get ready for the staff report on this, just want to thank all those who commented on this by sending their emails and letters. We tried to get back to you and acknowledge those. I can assure you that even those that weren't acknowledged, they were here. They were provided to us, and the council did receive those. We received over 50 communications. Tonight, the flow of the evening will be, we'll have a brief staff report by our city manager, Melissa Stevenson Diaz, followed by public comment. I have a handful of speakers cards, and then council discussion and questions, and then a council decision. I currently have a few speakers cards. If you would be so kind, if you intend to speak when we start public comment, I will not accept anymore. That's been kind of a common practice that we've done. So if you would like to get a speaker's card in on item 8A, please do so now. With that, I would like to turn it over to Melissa Stevenson Diaz, our city manager, who will present a report.
Thank you, Mayor. And Maria, if I could ask you to go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So to just give a quick overview of what I'll be covering this evening, we'll talk about the application of recently passed SB 415 to Redwood City, describe what other jurisdictions in the county are doing, and how those changes are affecting election costs, which are sadly a little more complicated than I think we conveyed effectively in the report. I'll be able to share information about the ad hoc committee's recommendation and the next steps, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to discuss those following public comment. So to begin with, the California Voter Participation Rights Act, also known as SB 415, was passed and intended to increase voter turnout at local elections. And as you saw in the staff report, our most recent turnout in 2015 was 31%, which was actually better than the several prior odd-year elections. But in contrast, in even-year elections, and particularly in presidential elections, our experience has been for much more dramatic voter participation. So 2014 was not a presidential election, but had a turnout rate of 45%. In 2012 and 2008 before it was in the 80 and 81% range. So under this law, we are obligated to change our election dates from the current odd year to an even year statewide election cycle. And the law gave us no specific direction about how to do that, but gave us a couple of time frames. So first, the city must have a plan in place by January 2018. and that plan must result in no more odd-year elections after 2021. So by 2022, all elections need to be on even years. This summer, the mayor established a council ad hoc committee with members Aguirre, Guy, and Meser to talk about the many options for moving forward with implementation of this law. Our city charter specifically gives the city council the responsibility for changing election dates. Our charter anticipated, I guess, that this day could come, and so designated that the process for changing from an odd year to an even year election would be the current and seated city council actually approving a change by ordinance. So for a snapshot of what other jurisdictions are doing, there are a total of 38 jurisdictions in this county who are affected by this law, and so far 12 of those have actually made decisions. So on the left, we show that 11 of those jurisdictions have opted to extend terms so that instead of having elections in 2017, they would have them in 2018. One of the jurisdictions, the city of San Mateo, will be having an election in 2017, and this is because this is an obligation of their charter. Unlike the city of Redwood City's charter, their charter did not have any provision for changing to an even year election, and so a charter amendment had to go to the voters, and that is what will happen in 2017. And their plan is for that 2017 election to result in a 5-year term for individuals that are elected in 2017, and then from there, 4-year terms on even years. Of the 38 jurisdictions, and included within the 12 that are on the left, there are a total of 6 cities. And I call that out just because a number of the jurisdictions that have already made some movement to comply with the law are school districts or other special districts, and not necessarily cities. So there's a total of 6 cities so far who have acted, and of those, all except for San Mateo, as I've described, are opting to extend their current terms and then to move from 2017 to 2018 elections. So election costs are, unfortunately, at this point, a little bit more of an art than a science. And we did have a substantial additional conversation today with the elections official to try to provide additional information. So the cost to the city of Redwood City for conducting an election varies by a number of points. It varies by the number of agencies that are participating in election, and most meaningful, the number of agencies that have the same voters and same polling places as we would. So school districts, for example, the decisions they make on local elections will more significantly impact the cost of our elections. And the other major factor is whether or not the election conducted is in person, requiring polling places, or is by mail. And as you know, the last election was an all-mail election. At this point, the elections office has not decided whether the next elections will be by mail. So while we know that all-mail elections are cheaper, we don't yet know if that's the approach that will be taken in 2017 or in future years. The city's average election costs for the past 4 elections have been about $74,000. Last election, that did include an optional decision by the city to conduct extensive community outreach to make sure that residents understood that voting would be required by mail and not available in person. So far, of the local jurisdictions who share precincts with us and share voters with us, 2 have decided to move their election to 2018. So we know certainly of 2 that would share our election costs who will not have an election in 2017. There are 2, however, who have not actually decided formally, and so we don't yet know what the high school district or the Belmont Redwood Shores district will choose to do in terms of bringing their elections into an even year format. So that means that there's still some range of potential costs for the city because, again, we don't know what those two agencies will do, and we don't know if the election will be by mail or in person. So our best estimate of the city cost for a 2017 election would be anywhere from $167,000 to $425,000. In either case, that's substantially more than our recent experience, anywhere from $93,000 to $351,000 more than we paid in 2015. The election office has been able to tell us that we would expect a 2018 election would be much lower than these projected costs because the 2018 election would also have federal offices involved. And so, again, we would have the benefit of sharing with a greater number of agencies. However, all they've been able to tell us is it would be much lower. They haven't been able to give us a specific number for 2018. So the ad hoc committee met twice since appointment over the summer. I would note that those meetings were publicly noticed and council members did report out on them at the end of meeting, as is your practice. And they just considered a number of factors in terms of trying to assess what was in the city's best interest. A concern was really when to implement the consolidation. As I noted, the intent of the law was to move to even year elections in order to move to greater potential for voter turnout. So some options considered would make that move more quickly, and some would take a longer period of time to achieve that. There also would be the option of having the election either in June or in November, and there are pros and cons with both of those dates. Depending on the path to getting to even years, that could affect council member terms to be either 3, 4, or 5 years. The committee also discussed costs, discussed what was possible and what was restricted under the city charter. And as we learned about what other jurisdictions in San Mateo County were doing, we were able to share that information as well. And then a final concern really is a staff workload concern, and that is the timeline that the City Council would be anticipated to make appointments to city boards, commissions, and committees. We've traditionally done that in years that are not election years in order to have a smoother workload over the course of the year. So following that discussion and thinking about all of those variables and potential impacts, the recommendation of the ad hoc committee is to hold elections in 2018 and 2020, which would necessitate increasing the current terms for elected officials by 12 months in both cases. So the 2018 election would replace the 2017 election, and those elected would be elected to a 4-year term, and we would then be on an even year cycle in a time frame that is obligated under SB 415. Similarly, the 2019 election would happen in 2020 instead, and then again for a 4-year term and moving us into even year elections. So the process for moving forward is that the City Council would introduce an ordinance tonight and would hold a second reading currently scheduled for October 24th. Under the state law, we also would have to have approval of that ordinance by the County Board of Supervisors. We would then be needing to mail notices to registered voters to make sure that they understood that the election's time frame would be changing, and we would anticipate we would actually be above and beyond what's required in the law so that we were clearly communicating any change that the City Council were to adopt. So with that, the committee's recommendation is to introduce an ordinance that would move the election years to 2018 and to 2020, as I've just described. We do have a small change to some of the wording in the ordinance, and so when it comes to the time of council discussion, I can describe that, but it's really just an implementation and correction of language in order to comply with state law. So with that concludes staff presentation.
We will go to clarifying questions now, not council discussion. We'll come back to that after public comment. I do have a number of speakers' cards. Are there clarifying questions at this point, Councilman Mazur?
So just one, because a couple of emails referenced the varying costs for all mail versus polling place elections, which you talked about a little bit. But Mike, I just want to make it clear that it's not up to us to decide, do we do an all-mail ballot or do we not do an all-mail ballot? We're entirely at whatever the elections office in the county decides, no matter what year we have our elections. So we have no control over that component of the process, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Bain.
I'd just like to verify a couple of numbers that I didn't see in the presentation tonight, but I discussed with staff earlier. So the cost of last year's election was $81,000, $30,000 of which was outreach, correct? Thank you.
And that outreach was due to the all-mail election, so the real cost of that election was closer to $51,000.
Correct. That's all true. And so we gave the average over prior years just because we
that.
don't know if it would be all mail again.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, with that, I'll go to public. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. Just on the slide that Vice Mayor Bain referred to, where you had the range of election costs, I think you said 2017. I forget what slide it is.
Back a couple more. Right there.
This one,
that
thank
one
you.
right there. And I know there may be some advocacy I heard in the beginning that council members should be treated differently, but is the cost range just for the 17 election, or is there the similar cost to do a 19 election? So does this cover both, or is this one?
We actually only asked about 17, and because there are variables, I don't want to guess that that's correct for 19 as well.
But there would be an additional cost for a 19 election, because one of the things that the ad hoc committee did also talk about was that all council members would be treated equally, whether it be 3, 4, 5. And so this is not just about the 17 election, it's about 2 elections, potentially.
That's true, and certainly the same factors are at play. So again, the number of agencies that share the cost dramatically affect the cost.
Okay. With that, I'm going to go to public comment, and I'm going to call these. I'm going to call, if you're not familiar with this, I will call your name. You will have 3 minutes to speak. There's a little yellow light that comes on with, I think, 30 seconds remaining. And I will call 2 names. If the second person, just for sake of time, could queue up behind him, it saves a little bit of time. So with that, Christina Umhofer, I believe. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Christina? And it's followed by Elise Dixon.
Is this on? Good evening. I'm Christina Umhofer, a lifelong resident of Redwood City. I have grave concerns with the way in which our city council has decided to move forward and implement the SB 415. SB 415 clearly states to start by 2018 and be in effect by 2022. However, you have decided to move forward without residents' input to extend terms by 1 year. Though I know you will not listen to me or the other residents against this, I would like to express why this should not happen in the manner in which you have proposed. Redwood City is not like its neighbors. We have had more square feet of development added and pending approval in the coming year, an election year, than any other city on the peninsula. What is at stake is not the few $100,000 it would take to hold an election in 2017, but the millions of dollars of lost benefits to the community, including more funds of affordable housing that goes beyond impact fees. We have projects and their developers all too eager to have their projects approved. The residents of Redwood City, who are the voters, have the right to weigh in by voting council members in or out. But you have decided to arbitrarily take this right away from the voters, your constituents. The decision should not have been decided based on what was easiest or least burdensome. It should have been decided on the best interest of the voters, the residents of Redwood City. We have yet to have an election where there were no candidates or where expenses stopped from running. As for aligning ourselves with other cities on the peninsula, they do not have the same issues at stake. The issues at stake next year for the school district and community college, They let them follow our lead and wait a year too. That way, we can all share the expenses of an election next year, and be on even years after that. With all of this said, you as City Council have already decided to deceive the resident voters of Redwood City with the way you are moving forward with implementing SB 415. There are 3 members whose terms end in 2017, Siebert, G, and Howard. To have Siebert and G on the ad hoc committee is grossly unethical. By conducting yourselves in this manner, you have told the residents of Redwood City you do not care about them or their thoughts and concerns. You have sold our city to developers, unions, RCIA, SAMCETA, Transit-Oriented Development, and the El Camino Corridor Committee. You should not be proud of the developments of downtown. You should be ashamed of how you conducted yourselves and misled the residents of Redwood City. The move to rush SB 415 is solely to get all 15 projects passed and nothing else.
Thank you. Well, hold on. Whoa. If you haven't been to it, I should have clarified. Some of you may not have been here. I don't know if any of you that just clapped have come up here and spoke. I would guess if I asked for a show of hands, it's probably terrifying to some of you. That's terrifying to some of us. Public speaking, other than the fear of death, is the number one fear. Anybody disagree with me? Didn't think so. We don't clap, we don't cheer, we don't boo, we don't hiss. We respect everyone with our silence, and we just let them speak. I would implore you, we will act that way. I would ask that you act that way. I won't boo when you say something I don't agree with. I won't cheer for those that I agree with. So join us in that, and it'll be a much nicer evening. Thank you. With that, Elise Dixon, followed by Pat Black.
Okay, well, it is terrifying to be up here, as you said, Mr. Siebert. So, but I am hopeful that, and I do think that the council is listening. We saw a quick response to the letter that was sent by Chris Johnson on Sunday from Mayor Siebert, and we're thankful and hopeful, and I think that the council is listening. And I would say Ian Baines strikes me as someone who's really listening. So thank you for taking time to hear public comments tonight. I urge you to reject the ad hoc committee's recommendation tonight and instead consider other alternatives that will not extend the terms of council members. Instead, taking time to include the community's input. I think that what the council has heard is that the community does want to weigh in on this big decision. And we, the community, haven't had an opportunity or enough time or forewarning on this issue to really weigh in. And I think it would benefit the council to take a little bit more time, since the decision isn't urgent, and let the community weigh in a little bit on this big, huge decision that's out there. It's tampering with term lengths. And it's a conflict of interest right now for sitting council members to extend their own terms without voter consent, or certainly some voter input beyond this evening. Residents want an opportunity to be heard. I think that the council has acknowledged, there's some people out there that really are heartfelt on this issue. Full analysis of the costs really aren't there. There's big, huge range, $74,000 to $425,000. That's a lot of difference on what it cost last time and what the estimate could be. I think that they're with more time, since the decision isn't urgent, to really look into what those costs are. If that's one of the reasons being used to make the decision, let's tighten up that money and really figure out what that money is. The city has communicated and had a desire for increased transparency and community engagement. I really believe that's true. You hear a lot about what council is trying to do to engage the community. So why rush this decision when some of the community does really want to weigh in? So finally, I'd hope that this evening the staff would be able to answer for you why no public involvement was included in this big decision. So thank you tonight for taking time to listen to us.
Thank you, Pat Black, followed by Diana Reddy.
Good evening, council members. My name is Pat Black. I'm a resident of 1548 Maple Street, Docktown Marina. So when I received my copy of the agenda, I was very taken back. And I feel very strongly about my right to vote. I was brought up by a person who didn't have the right to vote and came to this country, became a citizen, and we voted. It was just a rule of thumb. My boys turned 18. Nobody had to tell them. They had to register to vote. This was part of our DNA because we feel so strongly about being American citizens and having this right. And I'll tell you, I was really taken back, and I just wanted to go away. I'm leaving. I'm going to New York next week, and it's like, oh, I just need a break. And so I thought, no, this isn't it. This is my passion. My passion. I love Redwood City. I love everything about it. I give everybody credit for being an elected official. You deserve a lot of credit. It takes a lot. But one of the things we cannot do, or I advise you to reconsider, is changing our elected habits. We elected all our members on our city council for 4 years. 4 years. Let it be. As I see it, we can have an election in 2017. And then at that election, you're elected for 3 years. In 2019, the same thing, 3 years. And we're in compliance. This doesn't mess with the way it is. We need to be consistent in our habit of electing officials. This is real important. And the other thing that happened today that really kind of got me going is Susan B. Anthony was beaten today in 1872 because she tried to vote. Let me tell you that, she is one of my cherished role models to never give up. And it's real important for us to remember the importance of our residents here in Redwood City who are passionate about what's going on. And thank you so much for your service to our city.
Thank you. Diana Reddy, followed by Lee Callister.
So right after the election last year, one of the goals for this year was going to be transparency. And just to say, this process feels so not that. It feels so not transparent. And I understand and respect the fact that the charter allows this to happen. And I understand and respect the ad hoc committees examining the cost to the city behind the recommendation that it's making. However, if Pat's recommendation does not appeal to you, I urge you to consider the path that San Mateo is using. Though I understand the charter does not permit it as ours does, they will have an election where their voters can say, we understand this is going to be a 5-year election this year, which is what we didn't understand last year. The last election, we voted for four-year terms. And so San Mateo is going to be voting for, in 2017, those people who are up for re-election. The voters will then understand that that will be a 5-year election, and the seated council members, too, will be given an additional year. At least in that regard, council members or voters will understand and know what's in front of them. Otherwise, this is kind of a situation where the council understood, the city manager, everyone understands the charter and what's permitted and 415, but the voters don't. And they really need to feel like they're being heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Callister, followed by Efrat Berman.
So the previous speakers have covered a lot of what I wanted to say. As you know, I'm firmly opposed to extending this the election year. I understand the value of doing so, of changing the elections to be in consistent with the federal elections. I understand that you have the authority to do that under the charter. The question is, should you? many of us don't think it's appropriate to take this action right now. As Diana just said, you were all elected to 4-year terms, not 5. And the right thing to do to bring Redwood City's election in line with the national elections is to hold new 5-year elections or 3-year elections. I'm not pushing one method over the other, but not extend your own terms without so much as even a study session. Nor is there any need to do so right now. There's no hurry on this. As elected officials, you have the responsibility to face the voters at the end of your elected term so they can judge your performance. If you're running again and they like what you've been doing, they can re-elect you. But they should not have to wait another year to voice their approval or disapproval. These are tumultuous times in Redwood City. There's a lot of debate, there's a lot of disagreement over what policy should be followed. The election is a good way to gauge whether or not the public agrees with what you're doing. I also have to say that I don't think that anyone currently facing re-election should have been part of the committee proposing that the terms be extended. Please follow the lead of the City of San Mateo, do the right thing, and vote no on the proposal pending further study and public input. Thank you.
Efrat Berman, followed by Andy, I'm sorry, but last name Drow, I think.
Good evening, dear Mayor, City Council members, City Manager and staff. My name is Efrat Berman, and I'm here today to talk about democracy. Sorry, broke the stick. In the beginning of this meeting, you all stood up and pledged allegiance to the flag. And now, what does that mean? This flag stands for freedom. This flag stands for democracy. Democracy, excuse me, is a very fragile thing, and it has to be kept safe, starting from the smallest organization all the way up to the federal government. And how can we expect our leaders to keep it at the state and federal levels if we can't keep it well and alive at our own town? All of you here, honorable council members, were voted in by all of us, the citizens of Redwood City. And you're voted for 4 years, no more, no less. It is the right and freedom of the citizens to vote again in a special elections for a different term length. Please help keep democracy alive. Don't turn the Pledge of Allegiance into Pledge of Legion. Pledge a Legion. Vote no on this item, please. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Excuse me, please. I asked nicely earlier. I won't tolerate it continuing. Andy, is it, I'm sorry, last name Drawl?
You got it.
Okay, good. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Followed by Victor Toriano.
Well, thank you very much for letting me address the City Council, Mr. Mayor. I am against the amendment to 2.27.6, the adjustment to the City of Redwood City Municipal Code, and particularly I think the 12-month extension to your terms is pretty heinous, and as many of the other speakers have said, undemocratic, and I don't think it's right. You don't know, according to the Economic Policy Institute, San Mateo County is the most unequal county in California as far as wage distribution goes, income distribution. We have problems unique to the United States and even unique to California alone. And one of the biggest problems that hits me pretty hard is the rents in this town. And I don't think the City Council has addressed the rent problem and the amount of housing that we should have for people that are of lower income. My rent has gone up 54.7% over the past 5 years. The last hike I had was 9.5%. I've lived a lot of places in this country. I've addressed the council before. I've never seen the rent hikes like we have here. There are things the city council could have done, and I don't think you've done them, to try to address that by having more low-income projects, by having more percentage of low-income housing in these huge projects that have gone up in the city. I mean, it looks like you have Taj Mahals going up in downtown Redwood City. These things are just huge, taking up whole city blocks of pure iron, tall iron and steel. It's just pretty amazing over the 6 years I've lived here, seeing the change in this town and the congestion. And I don't want to glaze over your eyes too much, but the average annual income domestically in the United States is about $45,500. In San Mateo County, it's $88,148. So it's 93% higher than the rest of the country. For the top 1% in the U.S., the average annual income is about $1.1 million. In San Mateo County, it's $3.9 million. So that's 236% above the national average. So we have a huge disparity in wages within this town. And I don't think, and within this county, within this town, and I don't think the city council has addressed it. The Mercury News just on September 25th said that the past 5 years, the 5 most populous Bay Area counties, wages are up 30%, but median home prices are up 87%. So we're not coming close to having the wages to cover the housing. And the city council, I don't think, has properly addressed this problem of the wage disparity. One thing you could have done was up the minimum wage.
Please, your time is up.
All right, thank you. I'm against the 12-month extension. Thank you for your time.
Victor Toriano, followed by Julie Pardini.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Siebert, members of the City Council, staff. My name is Victor Toriano. I am a Redwood City resident and as well a San Mateo County Building and Construction Trades member. I'm asking that you implement SB 415 by moving Redwood City's elections date for City Council elections to even-numbered years as quickly as possible by extending each existing council member's term by 12 months. Moving the next 2 City Council elections to 2018 and 2020 will accomplish the implementation of SB 415 in the most expedient and cost-effective way. And if our goal here is to increase voter participation in City Council elections, then adding 12 months to existing terms is the fastest strategy to actually increase voter participation. Opponents to increase voter participations are actually advocating that the city continue with odd-year elections because of political perception. These perceptions are simply unfounded. Continuing with odd-year elections will only increase the election cost and continue to disenfranchise Redwood City voters for at least 2 more election cycles. The Redwood City School District, Sequoia High School District, the College District, as well as other similarly sized cities such as South San Francisco, have all made this same common sense decision without letting politics get in the way of having more people vote as quickly as possible. Look at it this way. Right now, an average of about 9,000 people vote in our city council elections. Moving to 2018 and 2020 with an addition of 12 months to each term will increase the average number of voters from 9,000 to 25,000. In a city of over 80,000 residents, it sure seems like more people who vote, the more representative. Let me get this right. It sure seems like the more people who vote, the more representative of the 7 people sitting on the city council will be of the entire community. Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Julie Pardini, followed by Ricky Harrison.
Hi, Mayor Siebert, Vice Mayor Bain, council members. I'm here to talk about voting rights tonight. And I wonder why, because this is not Selma, Alabama. This is not a third world country. I'm a longtime resident of Redwood City. My name is Julie Pardini. And I'm also a lifelong citizen of the United States, where I have become accustomed to having my vote count. I hope you will consider your votes carefully tonight. What is at stake? Not the money for an election. At stake are the votes of all voters who in good faith marked their ballots in the elections of 2013 and 2015 for Redwood City Council, not only for candidates, but also for terms of office. And I could care less what council members have what terms of office. That is not the point of my discussion. I ask, how can a vote be changed retroactively with no consent and after the fact, as would happen if you go forward with the cancellation of the 2017 election? In this country so far, we have been able to trust in this. Once we mark our ballot, no one can change or eliminate our vote. That essential trust and that promise is nothing to be tampered with. Here is a quote by Larry J. Sabato, New York Times best-selling author and award-winning political analyst. I quote, "Every election is determined by the people who show up, but not this time. Because if you extend these terms, bypassing the electorate, the people who showed up will not have determined these elections at all." Here's 2013. 2013 election results. That's what's going to happen to the election results. 2015, gone. I count on my ability to vote in this country. If you need to change terms, change them before an election, not after. We have already cast our vote, and it is counted, and we're supposed to be able to trust that in this country. If we cannot trust that in this country, then we are in trouble, or in this city, for that matter. Now, I believe this sincerely with all my heart, and that is why I'm here tonight to tell you. Thank you.
Ricky Harrison.
Hello, how you guys doing? I'm just a plain ordinary guy, so I thought I might just say what's on my mind instead of writing these speeches like everybody else does, so be patient with me. My father and 10 generations have served under this flag that you pledge allegiance to today. Okay, they fought for freedom, right to vote, and everything else. And when I see an organization that takes that right away, that shows me that it's tyranny. And I cannot be in a country where there's tyranny, especially in the city of Redwood City, who I moved here 8 years ago to from San Francisco because I got tired of Mayor Lee's and Dianne Feinstein, because I lived in the city for 30 years and I dealt with their tyranny. Here was really cool. I thought it was mellow. I was very happy. Everybody was down to earth. I walk out now, it's like walking in downtown San Francisco. I don't want to live in San Francisco. So, you know, you do your votes, whatever this odd and even things is, because like I said, I'm just a simple guy. I just don't want to deal with it. If you get elected for 4 years, do your job. 4 years, get on, do whatever. If you get elected good. But, you know, just to take my rights away and what my forefathers have given me, that's just a shame. I'm sorry. That's just a shame. That shows me that you're just tyrants. And I apologize for using that word because I never thought I would call anybody in the U.S. a tyrant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our speakers' cards. I'm just going to clarify a couple of, just one point. I was not on the ad hoc committee. I did not go to any of the meetings. I appointed the ad hoc committee. That's what the mayor does. Just for the record, the people that were appointed to it, 2 people came from the next election cycle. I did that very purposefully. That was Councilwoman Aguirre and Councilwoman Mazur. We had, and then I appointed 1 from the election cycle in 2017, which is also the election cycle that I'm on. So I purposely weighted the committee away from the upcoming election. I purposely did not sit on it So that information that was given was completely false. So I just wanted to clarify that going into the comments, because those two things are not a matter of opinion. Those are a matter of fact on the record of when I appointed the committee. So with that, we'll go to council comments. I will look to, the committee asked a couple of questions. Again, I just want to thank up front so that if we don't get to this, I'm going to mention this later in the meeting, but what we do here on Monday nights, any of us would say is the tip of the iceberg in terms of meetings we go to. So I appreciate that this committee added meetings to their very busy schedule and did that. That was Councilman Councilman Mazer, and Councilwoman Aguirre. I know some of you asked some questions. I wondered if any of the committee members wanted to speak first. If not, actually anybody that turns their microphone on can speak at this point. So with that, Councilman Mazer, now I'm going to call on somebody who looked like she might be ready. Go ahead.
It's often me, so. So yeah, I mean, I'll just say a couple of things. I would like to hear from my colleagues what they're thinking. Since we can't talk to our colleagues other than the people that are on the committee, I don't know what the other members of the council are thinking. But I'll just share with you my thought process and how I came to my decision to make this recommendation. So for me, going into it, I actually thought that I would not be making this recommendation. I actually thought that I would be recommending that we shorten our terms to come into compliance. I didn't necessarily tell anybody that, but that was sort of how I was thinking. I thought, that makes the most sense because it doesn't really, it just seemed to make the most sense to me. But as we went through the committee discussions and we heard from staff, and I talked to members of the Redwood City Elementary Board. So another point of clarification, we can't change what the elementary board has already done, and we can't change what the community college district has already done. So we could go to them and say, hey, we want you guys to move back to 2017, but they've already voted and they're already having their elections in 2018. So no matter what we do, that's going to happen. They have already voted to extend their terms. And in fact, although I'm a former member of the Redwood City Elementary Board, I didn't even know they were taking the vote as quickly as they did. So I called one of my former colleagues and said, hey, what are you guys thinking about this? I'd like to understand where the other jurisdictions in our community are. And she said, oh yeah, we already voted and we've already decided to extend our terms. And then we also got a letter, an email from the president of the community college district, which is, as previously indicated, also voted to extend their terms, urging us to also extend our terms so that the multiple jurisdictions that overlap would be aligned. As I said, I went in still thinking that, maybe shortening the terms, given the climate, given sort of what I've heard when I was out on my campaign, and subsequently that maybe shorter would be better. But as we talked through the different options, and I tried to talk through it with somebody today on the phone, and as we went through multiple different scenarios and multiple different configurations as we did in the committee, we had multiple chart papers up, as my committee members remember, trying to figure out, how could you do it in a way that not only considers cost, and I will say, as somebody who is elected, and part of my job is to make sure the city has enough money to continue its operations, I do have to think about cost. It is one of the things that I must think about, because if we don't have enough money, we have to cut services or other things. That being said, that isn't my only consideration. So we looked at the various options and we tried to figure out how could we make them work. And it got very complicated very quickly. And then I was trying to think about, well, okay, so how am I going to explain this to voters? A lot of people spoke tonight about the value of voting and the value of democracy. Believe me, when you're an elected official, you do respect the value of democracy and you do understand the power of voting. We have to go talk to voters if we're going to be sitting in the seat. And I, too, hold Susan B. Anthony in high stead as someone who's worked for women's rights pretty much my entire adult life. And I'm very clear about the value of people being able to vote. Again, the point of this state law that does require us to shift from odd year elections to even year elections, that's not a choice. We can decide when we do it, but we don't get to decide if we do it. I wanted to think about, like, how can I explain this to voters in a way that makes sense, that brings more people into the process sooner rather than later. And that's kind of how I got to agreeing with my fellow committee members. We did go back and forth. We didn't walk in and say, like, okay, this is what we want to do. That this made sense in terms of the best way to bring the most people into the election cycle in a faster way. A couple of other considerations around cost. One is that the cost is not just to the city, but the cost is also to the candidates. So candidates have to pay a certain amount of money to have their statements in the voter guides. You know that we currently have a 300-page voter guide, right? But in our elections, we have to still pay a cost to have them in the voter guide. The fewer number of jurisdictions that participate in that, the higher the cost is to the candidate. And, you know, honestly, we don't know. Has the cost created a barrier to people running or not? Because people haven't come and said, oh, I wish I could run, but I can't afford it. So we don't know. And we don't know how much that cost would increase if we were to continue to stay on an off-year election with our contiguous jurisdictions having moved to an even-year election. You know, from my perspective in Redwood City, even if we have different perspectives, we work together to figure out solutions to problems. It's why we have, as the council, committed to trying to be more transparent, do more communication, hear more from people. And so one thing I do want to mention is we are having we'll have our first community conversation on the 22nd, because we scheduled over the debate last time. Unfortunately, we didn't, but it was scheduled over the debate. And so I encourage people to participate in that so we can hear what you're thinking. We have heard you tonight, and we would also like to keep continuing to hear from you. And then the last thing I just want to say is I did get a call from our assembly member last Friday asking me about this and encouraging me to, I don't think he'd read who was on the committee, so he said, you know, I really hope that you guys are going to do this. I think it's the right thing to do for democracy. And for those of you who may not know, our assembly member is the one who put the bill in for an all-mail ballot trial in San Mateo County, which did increase voter participation. He is very committed to increasing voter participation. And so it meant something to me that he would take the time to call and express his opinion on that issue. And I told him I was going to share that. So I've talked for quite some time, but I did want people to at least understand my process and sort of how I got to where I was. And then I would love to hear from my fellow council members.
What I'm going to do, thank you, Councilwoman Mazur. I'm going to go back and forth. Councilwoman Borgens indicated she wanted to speak next, so to make this easy, I will then go back to Councilwoman Howard. I will then go back to Councilwoman Aguirre, Councilmember G, Vice Mayor Bain, and then myself. So that's the order we'll go in. So, Councilwoman Borgens.
Thank you. And first, I'd like to start and thank the committee. I am sure, sitting here, knowing my fellow colleagues, this was not an easy decision to come to. There was a lot of discussion. And having said that, I sit here because I was elected to a 4-year term. I was elected by the voters, and I consider that a contract to be 4 years. I realize we have a state mandate out of our control. It's not something that we pushed for. But at the same time, I think we have some options here. And I'm not comfortable. I totally agree with the voter right. You have a right to go to the voting box and vote. And I do believe this community we have very savvy voters. I think, especially as our community has changed, there is much more community dialogue. Our mayor and vice mayor have done an excellent job of making sure we have a communications committee. That's a new committee. What does that mean? It means more community involvement, more dialogue, more invitations to the community for us to hear. Inevitable, there are decisions we're going to make you're not going to like. It is a fact. Cost, Councilmember Mazur is absolutely correct. It is our responsibility to take good care of the city's dollars. Those are your dollars. We have to make sure they're spent in a very responsible way. But to me, this is more of on principle. I feel I am an elected official for 4 years, and to extend that is pushing that voter box a little too far. If I were to say 3 years, that would be something we have to do to go ahead and come in compliance with the state law. But I think we have options, and I'm not sure how that would work. I would like to see a 2007 election held with the verbiage that this election is, we could say, either for 4 years or 5 years, so the voters have that option. They can vote for the next city council members to a 4 or 5 year term, or we can say this is a 4-year term. The next election potentially could be we are going to change our cycle. However that would work, I don't know how that works legally. I don't know if we can do it. I'm just saying I would like the voters of Redwood City to have the opportunity to help us make this decision, because we have to comply. By 2018, we must be in compliance. We have to have something in place. I am not comfortable, even though I firmly support those who would be running next to a 5-year term. I have worked with these council members. I can tell you they are above reproach. I would be honored to work with them again. Having said that, I'm put here by the vote of the people, and I will stand on that vote. So at this point, I cannot support the committee's recommendation, but I wholeheartedly support the effort and time you put in and understand how you got there. So I support that, but at this point, I cannot support that recommendation. So I'd like to have more opportunities for discussion on other options.
Thank you, Councilwoman Howe. Please, that's the third time I've had to ask. Seriously. Councilwoman Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. I have a question for the city manager or the city attorney. In your comments, in your presentation, you said that it would cost approximately $93,000 to $351,000 more, possibly, for an election in 2017. My question was, if we moved it to 2018, isn't there the possibility there would be things on the ballot that we'd be voting on in 2017 and be having an election anyway, whether we decide to vote for electeds or not? Is that a possibility?
So that the city might have items on the 2017 election?
City or the county, or a number of things where we'd have to participate and use staff time and so forth as far as an election goes. I just wanted to know if there would be some sort of cost on our part to participate in a 2017 election, even though it didn't include elected officials.
So at this point, there is no plan for us to bring anything to the voters in 2017 other than otherwise we would have brought council member terms. As I mentioned, there are 2 local districts who we have not yet heard they've made a firm decision on whether or not they will go in 17 or 18. So it's possible Redwood City voters would need to vote for the Belmont and Redwood Shores district and for the Sequoia Union High School district. But in terms of the city, no, we don't have other measures to bring on the 2017 election.
And I know it hasn't been decided whether we're going to do all mail ballots, because it's certainly not our decision. But there is a possibility that we could lobby hard and heavy for something such as that, considering the cost savings that I believe we did realize from the last election.
Yeah, certainly the council could direct us to relay that request, yes.
Are there any other costs that might be incurred in 2017 that you can anticipate if we didn't go forward with elected officials?
No, I can't think of other costs other than we would need certainly to communicate with voters who would be otherwise expecting to be voting in 2017. That's something we would want to do. It's also an obligation under SB 415. So, but I would think that communication could be, a fairly minimal cost.
Well, if it was like the outreach we did for the mail-in election, that would be, what did we spend, 25, 30 grand? I'm just thinking that that kind of outreach would have to be done. I would think that would be a cost to be considered, but but thank you. I just wanted to know, because the cost issue, it's a big one, but however, I have to say, I want to be giving my thought process on going through this. This was something that all of us, I can see, did not take lightly, and I want to thank very much the subcommittee for tackling it and working with staff to pull out as much information as possible so that we could have an intelligent conversation this evening about this item. I agree with one of the speakers about the value of democracy and the value of a person's right to vote and what it means. So my concern is that regarding this, I feel we haven't had enough input from the community. I understand that this has been mandated, but we do have time. We do have till 2018 to put a plan in place. I believe and I respect the subcommittee's recommendation because I know how much time it takes to run a campaign, and I know how much it costs to run a campaign. So the sooner you give someone a heads up as to what the rules of the game are beforehand is certainly appreciated, and I can understand that if you were considering having an election in 2017, you'd want to give the voters as much notice as possible. And if you weren't going to have something in 2017, it would be the same. You'd want to give them as much notice as possible so that people could plan forward. So I appreciate you coming back as quickly as you did with this recommendation. But I do have a concern about the fact that we have been talking about open communication and transparency, and I can't get over my concern that we haven't had that in this particular, for this particular matter. I'm the only one sitting up here, and maybe the only one in the audience who was part of the 1994 election. And the decision to change the terms to 3 years was made before I was elected to council. But in 1994, prior to the election, it was decided that whoever was elected in 94 would have 3-year terms. The reason that was done was because the school districts all came to the city, and people in the community came in droves. I remember listening to that they felt that we would have more recognition as a community and more light shown on local issues if we split from the general elections. As I recall, voter turnout was not that great at that time in 94. And we didn't have internet, we didn't have all the social media to spread the word. All we had were some newspapers and word of mouth and whatever the city could do. So it was decided so that we could shine more on the issues of this city and the schools, that we would pull away from general elections and hold local elections separately from the general election. And so then Councilmember Jim Hartnett and I were elected, and we served 3-year terms. And then we ran again in, 97? Thank you. 97. I can honestly say, having 3 years to get up to speed was, I felt it was I did my best. I did double time trying to catch up with everybody who was there longer than the 2 novices, Jim and myself. It takes a year or two, as you know, to be on a committee and get up to speed. It's a lot to absorb. So I have to be honest with you, I could not support a 3-year term I wouldn't support a 3-year term, because I know what I went through, and I know what Jim Hartnett went through, trying to get up to speed on all the crucial issues at that time, and there were many, and trying to be an important part of, and contributing member of the council while learning all the language and budget information, learning all the staff members' names and where everybody worked. I wouldn't support 3 years. I could support 5 years. However, again, like I said, I see that from the information given to us that what we had hoped for in 94 hasn't really turned out to be so successful. And maybe going back to working with general elections is, I hope, a good answer. I hope it turns out to be true, that people will get engaged in larger numbers. So I'm hoping for that. But I still have this concern in my heart about not enough citizen input and people feeling as if their right to vote had been tweaked and tainted somehow because we're changing the rules of the game at this point. So I would like to either see further discussion on this matter to see what other options we can have, or consider an election in 2017 for 5 years and 2019 for 5 years. But I'd be reluctant at this point to change a council member's term to 5 years in light of the very sincere testimony that's been given here this evening and that I respect highly, because I know you were probably nervous and uncomfortable, and I appreciate that. And it meant so much more because you did show up and speak that way and were respectful. So thank you for that.
Councilwoman Aguirre.
I also appreciate the folks that came out, especially those that sent emails and were very thoughtful with their ideas and the process. But having gone through the process, I really still hold by it, and I hope that folks that were here listen to the process and were as open as we want to be to listening to you and how this is state mandated. When we sat and state mandated how all of the jurisdictions are addressing it, when we sat down and said, okay, we were by law elected for 4 years. And that was my commitment as well. So when I think, wait a minute, I'm going to add a year to my commitment. So there are two ways of looking at this as well, because of all the things that we do. We all have other full-time jobs. So in a way, for me, it was a burden to think of that, of having to do the extra year, because I signed up for 4 years. And I've been doing this for 10 years, and I did 2 years for Ira Ruskin, and I enjoyed it and loved when I was on the city council. But you have to also think that this is something that's kind of been imposed in how we address it. And I agree with Councilmember Howard about doing it for less the time. In a way, if you say we do it for 3 years, you're shortening your vote. You voted for us for 4 years. Now, you want to say for 3 years? So think about, there were so many complicated things that we were thinking about when we were addressing this and looking at all the options. One of my questions is, if we in 2017, is there a possibility, because as you heard from the report, there's a possibility that everyone is going to vote for a 5-year term and the elections are going to move to 2018 and 2020. Is it possible that Redwood City would be alone because we're waiting to look at the process? And then I know the expense isn't the only issue, but who would turn out if we were the only ones because we waited for an election in 2017? Do we have now kind of an idea that maybe everyone will turn to 2018 from what we're hearing?
We don't know formally for the 2 remaining districts. So, we hear informally, but we don't know. They've not formally taken action. So it is a possibility.
And it is a possibility that we would have our elections and we would be the only ones having an election in 2017, because most of the jurisdictions are thinking of moving ahead. And, even though we do have that 2018 time to make a decision, by the time we do all the math that we showed you that we did, it would affect our boards, committees, and commissions. It would affect a lot of other things that we've discussed as well. So I'm hoping that when you've heard these explanations, because a lot of the emails and a lot of the speakers made a lot of assumptions that this was a self-serving process, and it wasn't. It was a very thoughtful process on how we serve you, whether we're doing it in 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. And those are the options, and there's repercussions in all of those. So it wasn't to say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do another year. or I deserve it. No, you elected us for 4 years, and to cut it is one issue, to add it is another issue. And it's better that we move with the jurisdictions that we're moving so that we do have more turnout. As it's been interesting in Redwood City that we went to even years, now we're back to odd years. And I've heard for some folks, it's really nice that in odd years we don't have you seen the ballot? I mean, most of you have already voted. It's nice that we had the odd years, that we had certain elections, certain school districts where people could focus. But we can't do that anymore, and our hands are tied. So I'm grateful for my colleagues for their input, for the community, and for the committee that I served on.
Thank you. Councilmember G.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. And let me just say thank you to my committee colleagues, Councilmember Agidi and Councilmember Mazur. It was a very open conversation about what we do, and none of us asked for SB 415. Nobody in Sacramento asked any of the cities or the local agencies about it. But when you look at the legislations that Assemblymember Mullins championed for the all mail-in ballot, and I've talked to other Sacramento elected officials, they're pretty damn serious about the abysmal turnout at the local level in the off-year elections. And that's what this is all about. Trying to find a way to increase voter turnout that we haven't been successful at in the odd year elections. And it's really amazing to listen to the history where the school districts asked us to join them, and they're the first ones to leave when the opportunity came up. It just kind of befuddles me. And while we do have 2 agencies in the odd year elections that have already voted, I've had informal conversations, and it is highly likely that the high school district will make a change also. They're just dealing with some other election issues that we haven't taken upon us yet, but the community college district's doing the same thing. So there is the high potential that in Redwood City we can be the last one left in an odd year election. That's more than a 50-50 chance. And we are looking at two cycles, because I mentioned earlier in my clarifying question to the city manager, one of the things I was adamant about is that we are all treated equally, even though there was early advocacy that we would be treated differently, and the committee unanimously said we would be treated equally, all 7 of us up here. So when I look at what the other jurisdictions are doing, other agencies are doing, how quickly they moved. They didn't even talk to us. They just moved. As Councilmember Mazur said, her school board members didn't even let her know. Well, but still, I mean, this affects all of us. And this is not just cities and counties. It affects all agencies that have an odd year election. Cost is an issue. This is not the only one. Our city manager in our 5-year budget projection has estimated at least for the next 5 years to be in deficit, if I remember correctly. Where I sit on some of the other boards, 1/3 of our revenue comes from sales tax, and in one of my boards, I said over 70% of our budget comes from sales tax. It's declining. Last year, we were under budget by $3 million. I would not be surprised this year, this fiscal year, if we're under budget by $5 million. Those are big numbers. The economy is shifting. I respect all the speakers that came tonight and those that emailed. And there were different opinions here tonight as well as on email. And so when I look at costs, voter turnout, and most importantly, trying to get that from 25% or 18% or depending on what year and who's up to 50%, and then being more inclusive, that's where I came down on the committee recommendation, is that we've got to find a way to be more inclusive of everyone that lives here in Redwood City, just not those that have been here recently, those that have been a long time, those that have been in between. We have 5 generations alive in this city. It's pretty damn amazing. I was just at a breakfast meeting this morning that someone told me those kids that were born in 2000 could be expected to live 120 years. And every year, our lifespan increases by 3 months. So we have to find a way to open up the doors, be more inclusive, and do it as quickly as possible. But I still come down, and there's still advocacy I heard this evening. My insistence is that we all 7 of us be treated equally, No difference between 17 and 19.
Vice Mayor Bain.
Mayor, first of all, I want to thank everybody from the community who weighed in, either speaking before us tonight or by email. 90% of it was very respectful and fact-based, and I want to encourage more of that behavior. And I'm really happy that we didn't have more negative comments. A couple of them were, and I hope that we don't have that as we go forward with these types of discussions in the future. I want to address a few things that have been said. So it's very, I think everybody in this room understands that we have to move to even year elections. That's not a choice. We have three ways to do it. And all three of those options do treat all council members equally. I understand the importance that the committee placed on that in making the recommendation. I want to say that all three of these options do. Shortening terms was never an option. The three ways we get there are the committee's recommendation before us tonight, or doing an election in 2017 and 19 for 3-year terms, or 17 and 19 for 5-year terms. All three of those options would put us on an even year cycle. I support option 3 for many of the reasons some of my colleagues have outlined. Like Councilmember Howard, I have a lot of history and context with council elections. I wasn't on the council in 94 and 95, but I was actually at the meeting in 94 in your position in the audience where I watched that discussion very intently. And I remember Dick Clare, who was on the council at the time, said that having elections in even years was like the Incumbent Protection Act, because people would vote for the names that they know automatically. And in many ways, the decision the council made in 94 was in reaction to some things that happened in the 92 campaign. So there's a political way of looking at this. But the argument at the time was, if we align with the odd year elections, school board and otherwise, we will have people who are more engaged, who are going out to vote for local issues, and who are less distracted by the presidential and the gubernatorial elections. What was happening, what we saw in 92, was a lot of the down ballot races, including council members, people didn't know who they were voting for, and there was a lot of drop off between president and city council. And in some cases, people tended to vote for the ballot order. Those were some of the things that came up in that 94 discussion. I had the opportunity to be appointed to the council in 98 and also run for a special election in 98. So like Councilmember Howard, I'm the other person up here who's run in both an odd year and an even year. And I can tell you that running in an even year, I had to raise a lot more money. And it was a lot harder to reach people who were not engaged. The cost to the candidates came up. The cost is not in our ballot statement. The cost is in getting our word out to the voters. The more voters you have to reach in the likely voter pool, the cost increases for candidates. So costs will increase for candidates in the future. And I have heard anecdotally from people that that is dissuading to people who are thinking about running for office. It shouldn't be, but it is a factor. There was also there was some discussion about continuing operations, and I want to say that there are a few different ways of looking at it. I talked about a little bit about politically. There's the pragmatic way of looking at it. I think that's largely where the committee's recommendation came from, and then there's the philosophical way of looking at it. And pragmatically, yes, $425,000 is a lot of money. That's a worst case scenario number. I believe that there are ways that we can reduce that cost by going to an all-mail election. I do believe that we could lobby both our legislators if we need to do that again, or if that can just be done on the local registrar's level, I believe we can do that as well. Personally, I thought the mail-in ballot election was a success. I mean, 31% is a big improvement over other local elections. And one of the speakers said tonight, every election is determined by the people who show up. I couldn't agree more. In 2014, an even year election, turnout was only 45%. So between 31 and 45% is not a huge difference. I suspect we'll see more in this year's election. But in terms of costs, that is a lot of money. But to put things in perspective, earlier tonight, We approved something on our consent calendar where we're receiving $220,000 from selling off remnant parcels. So that money that we just took in is roughly half the cost of our worst case scenario election. We have paid out millions in lawsuits. So while $425,000 sounds like a lot of money, in the bigger scheme of things, it's really not that much for city operations. It's a two-time cost, 17 and 19, if we go with option 3. But I don't believe that cost and efficiency is the way that we should be looking at it. I agree with what Councilmember Borgen said in terms of principles. When I signed up to run for this office, and by the way, I am in my last term now, so whatever happens, I'm termed out. I'm not running for re-election. I signed up for a 4-year term, and I believe that the community signed me up for a 4-year term. I firmly believe in that, and I would support an option to go to 5-year terms for 17 and 19, which would get us to re-elections in 22 and 24. But I'm not going to support the recommendation before us tonight. And thank you to the committee for doing the work on this.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Bain. I'm going to go and make my comments now. I just want to clarify a couple of things, too, that were said earlier. One, in terms of a conflict of interest. This could be looked at as a conflict of interest for all 7 of us. In some way, it's going to change what happens to all 7 of us, with the exception of my friend Vice Mayor Bain.
We try to give him 12 more.
It does affect you, but in terms of more terms to run, it does affect all of us. And I believe I think it must be the FPPC came out when they passed this and said and ruled that there would be no conflict of interest. That's why we were dealing with this. I would have almost rather, in a case like this, the state just have decided and told us what to do. I'll be very honest with you. When I moved here, it was in 1997. Was the first time I voted, and of course I voted for Diane. Actually, Ira Ruskin was the first politician I ever. Having grown up in the mountains, nobody went door to door, and the first time everyone knocked on my door, I thought he was joking. I actually really liked it because it did focus on that. That was what that election was about. So when I hear things like we're taking a right away, we didn't ask for this. We didn't ask to add this to our agenda. We didn't ask to add this to our plate. This was handed to us. And quite frankly, I wish the state would have just gone all the way and said, do this. It's not unusual for the state. I deeply appreciate what our state legislators all do. But from time to time, we get handed mandates, and sometimes they're even called unfunded mandates. This is a mandate that was decided halfway and unfunded. So this is kind of a half-baked, unfunded mandate that we were handed to deal with. So please appreciate the fact that I don't think any of us are trying to be tyrants. Been in third world countries, have a friend that's a member of parliament in an extreme third world country on the continent of Africa. I take some exception to the reference to us being tyrants. We're just trying to do a good job. You heard a number of speakers, and I appreciate that. A number of the emails we got, a number of the speakers tonight. Thank you for your appreciation and kind words for what we do. And it was mentioned that whatever term we add or take away, we do sign up for this. This is not a pity party, but this is a tremendous amount of work. In terms of public input, that's what we're doing tonight. Now, that's what we've taken. That's the inordinate number of emails that we read and I answered as mayor. That is the inordinate number. There were speakers that were here tonight. This is how we do things. This is where we take public input. We can't all sit together and give each other input. That's another state mandate that it's probably a good thing that happens. So let me tell you where this comes down for me. I understand the issue that we were elected and there was a contract and we were given 4 years. I believe in that there were some other things we were given, and I think one of them for me, and in fact, if you go back and look at the brochures that I put out in 2009, one of the 2 things that I said I would always run on, and that is fiscal responsibility. That's just who I am. There's a different reason that all of us have gotten involved in city politics. Probably very different reasons. For me, it was all about fiscal responsibility. It's why I make decisions here. It tends to be, kind of what I lean back on in terms of the way we make decisions. And so I heard it said tonight, what is this really, what's the additional cost of of these elections? I don't look at it as the cost of elections. We don't have an election pool of money. Sometimes we talk up here about different buckets of money. You know, we have sewer money, we have water money, we have parking money. Election money comes out of the general fund. That's where it comes from. It's green money in this case. So I don't look at this as what it will cost for an election. I look at this as what we will not spend money on. And let me take you down some very real numbers. One, I believe that I am elected as I am hired at my job to give a worst case scenario. When my boss asks me if something's what it's going to cost, and I tell them $1 million and it's $1.5 million, I don't keep my job. What I get to do is polish my resume and go tell someone else, hopefully more accurately. But I'm asked to give worst case scenarios, and I believe that that is what we do. I learned that from Brian Ponte, our longtime finance director, who I had the privilege of actually playing golf with the other day, and he reminded me, you know, that's kind of what you do. That's what he used to stand there and do, was give us worst case scenario. And in the end, if we ended up with more money, we had fun. We don't know if we had fun with it. We didn't go out on vacations or anything, but we took the opportunity to look at some creative ways to spend those surpluses. So let's take a look at it. If we vote to have elections in 2017 and 2019, and I would argue that even though the deadline is 2018, I think we owe it. We have to some degree. If we wait till 2018 to make a decision, then it just keeps getting definitely more expensive. So the numbers that were shown were roughly $400,000 worst case scenario. That's not once, that's twice. That's 2017. If everything stays the same, 2019 is the same cost. That's roughly $800,000 worst case scenario. So what does that buy? About 4 police officers for a year. Probably a number of code enforcement officers. I heard passionate speeches tonight about democracy. I sat when we browned out Engine 9 from Station 9 downtown and cut hours at Shaberg Library. I was Councilmember G and I were elected in 2009 to our first term. Not the most fun budget year. If you remember 2009, we were in the holds of a terrible recession. Impassioned speeches about keeping Shaberg Library open more hours. So the argument just changes. I heard earlier tonight in a closed session, we're going into fiscal year 17-18 right now, today's dollars, about a $400,000 deficit. Add to that, we're going to be looking at several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm not okay. It is a big deal on the money issue for me, not because of what it costs to run an election, but because of what I know I'm going to say no to later on. And there will be a room full of different, maybe some of the same, impassioned people wanting money for things that we don't have because we spent it on that. So, when you've got to ask yourself, is this worth it or is this worth it? And we've got to balance that. The second thing is in terms of democracy. So I have the privilege of working at a private high school, and a couple of times I've been asked to come teach one day I don't teach, I do facilities work, but with a senior class, 12th graders in their government class. And every time I've asked this question, there are roughly 83,000 now, 83,000 people in Redwood City. In the last election in 2013, I generally ask them, out of 83,000 people, how many people it took for me to get elected. I finished in 3rd place for 3 seats. And I'm looking at the results right now. I actually pulled it up. I was elected with 3,730 seats. That's votes, seats, kind of seats. You had to, votes. That's abysmal. I mean, the fact that less than, I think it's roughly 4% of the population of a city voted for me. That's why I sit here right now. Okay, that's ridiculous. If this were to go through, again, worst case scenario, this increases voter turnout by roughly 30%, go from about 30% to about 45%. That's worst case scenario, could go much higher. That immediately means that I go from 3,700 votes to needing 5,000 votes. Still poor, in my opinion, that less than 10% of the population puts people in charge that make decisions for 100%. of the people. But we've got to do something about increasing voter turnout and doing it immediately. If anything, I understand the argument about democracy. This increases democracy. This increases significantly the number of votes that it will take to be elected. So those are my reasons for supporting the recommendation. I thank the committee for its work. I know it wasn't easy, and it wasn't without complication. So I'm not sure where we're at, except for I see a hand from Councilwoman Mazur.
So a couple of things. First, whatever vote we took tonight wouldn't actually put this into effect, right? Because this is only a first reading, and the second reading would be, currently it's scheduled for October 24th. In theory, it could pass tonight, and in theory, it could not pass it the next time. Is that accurate? I mean, just obviously it's theoretical right now, but.
That is correct. The council has two opportunities. Today, it would be an introduction, and that's what is being considered. And October 24th is the second reading, the adoption.
So we could also move the second reading to a later date, not just have it next week.
That is correct. It's only currently tentatively scheduled for the 24th, but the second reading can happen on any regular council meeting.
So we could move it to a later date and have some more opportunity for public input and conversation. Is that?
So typically, if the council would want additional opportunity for public input, I would recommend that you continue the item in order to provide for that before introducing the ordinance.
Rather than voting on a motion.
When an ordinance is introduced, it cannot be changed substantively onto second reading, and so really there isn't that opportunity that maybe you're thinking of.
Okay, that's helpful. So one of the things that is also concerning me at this point is that we aren't anywhere close to a unanimous decision. And I know it's not required. I've taken votes that are 4-3 or 3-4 or whatever. I've been on both sides of that. But this, to me, is a sort of a different level of consequence. I think that I still think that the committee's recommendation is a good recommendation, but I am concerned about moving forward with something like this on as close as we can get to being evenly split from what I've heard people say up here. So I'm trying to figure out how we can keep this moving forward, not delay significantly, but also think about an opportunity to have some more conversation about this. I don't know. In the end, it may come down to a 4-3 vote. That's very possible. But I'm wondering I don't know that I would feel comfortable moving this recommendation with the split that we have right now.
So just for clarification, and thank you, Vice Mayor Bain, I think for putting it very clearly, if we stick with the people are treated equally, there are really three options.
Right.
So public input, I'd be curious, I guess, what type of public input and in what form we'd be looking for, that in terms of a preference for one of those, or are we looking at what other agencies might do, or what?
Well, so a couple of things. One is we will be having our 2x2 meeting with the high school district and the elementary district tomorrow. So we'd have an opportunity to hear from the high school district what their plans are, which would be helpful for me to know. Two, since it's on our tentative agenda next week, we could continue this exact item to next week and then make a decision next week rather than tonight?
That is correct. The council can choose to continue this item for decision for the first reading next week.
Because for me, as I said, once we got to here, I had not heard everybody's thoughts, and I'd like to have an opportunity to consider them. I know that my people who weren't on the committee with us also hadn't had an opportunity to hear the committee's thoughts, and I don't know if having a little bit of time to take a step back from being able to hear from the public, from reading people's emails, people might be willing to come back and consider the committee's recommendation again next week. Maybe not. Again, we may just be in this exact same place, and we may end up moving forward. But I'm just wondering if a week would give us a chance to think about it a little bit more.
So is it helpful, and Vice Mayor Bain, are you good with that?
I'm sorry.
Are you good with your comments?
Yeah.
I'm going to move to Vice Mayor Bain.
Yeah.
Just want to make a quick comment. It would be helpful for me to hear from people. You're right. I mean, sometimes these are how decisions are made. So it's fairly rare up here that it comes to 4-3. But I think sometimes doesn't disvalue a decision for me. It would be helpful for me to know whether people think they would hear something that would change their mind. Because I also, as I've said before, I appreciate all of the input. I've read all the emails. I've gathered a tremendous amount of input from this. I think the one question is what the high school district is going to do, and I have a comment about that I will make. But I would be interested to know from everybody. I mean, it sounded like everybody kind of made up their mind. Is there a piece of information that you think may make you side with the recommendation or turn away from the recommendation? That would be helpful, because if there's not, I question that's a valid point. So with that, Vice Mayor Bain.
For me, yes. I would really like to know how the 2x2 meeting goes. We did get an email from someone at the community college district, and I completely understand the rationale for that. That's a county-wide election. But I don't understand the rationale for the Redwood City School District. I have not spoken to any of the district members. I think, like Councilwoman Mazur, I wasn't aware that they were taking the vote. I suspect many people in the audience and parents in the district weren't aware of that. I actually was wondering if they might reconsider their vote if we were to go in a different direction, because then they would be able to share costs with us. So I'd be able to hearing how that conversation goes, as well as the high school district. I think if the high school district heard some of our thinking on this issue, maybe they would take a different position than the one that we think they might be heading towards.
Councilman Borgens and then Councilwoman Howard. You had it on earlier. Councilwoman, I'm trying to keep track. Councilwoman McGinnity, Councilwoman Howard. I just saw these lights on earlier.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, it depends on what we want to gather. And if one council member gets the information on what the high school district is thinking, how is that going to influence or be part of a community conversation? And what does that look like? And I really do not want to be part of imposing our ideas on other jurisdictions, whether it's the school districts or others. We are sharing information. I don't want to assume that we will change their minds or they will change our minds. I think it's what we did as a committee was gather that information, and it's coming slowly. It'll be coming within the next months, and it wasn't to, and it's more of a collegial, not say, hey, so we're doing this, you gotta want to do this. I never want to impose on it. I have too much respect for all of my other districts, elementary districts, harbor districts, all of the others to do that. So what does that look like for me going to one meeting to make a change in the decision on how they got there? We already know that everyone has to get there, and they're going to get there in a different way. And when you get that information tomorrow, what is that going to do? Are you going to share it with the whole community? Are you going to share it with this group? I mean, I want to know what that hauling or step waiting for a meeting equates to.
Councilwoman Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. I was going to clarify that the meeting tomorrow is what we call the 2+2+2, which is actually the Redwood City Elementary School District, as well as the Sequoia High School District, and Councilmember Mazer and myself. And we meet, and what we do is discuss concerns, how we can share resources, things that are coming up, red flags, a whole bunch of different things. And these meetings have been very, very constructive and productive. And I see no reason why we couldn't do, Councilmember Mazer and I could report out at the next council meeting just to have the discussion about our meeting tonight and how difficult it was for us in making this decision, recognizing that two of the people sitting at the table have made the decision and two haven't, as far as we know. I think it's a great opportunity to have that discussion and report back to council. Whether you decide to continue or not, I still would suggest we report back to you. But I think it's just additional information because we are all in this together. We're all the local constituencies here, and I'd like to know their thoughts on why they haven't decided or why they already decided.
So if I can make a suggestion, because I was going to make this earlier when I heard about the 2+2+2. One, let's be very clear, Belmont Redwood Shores School District is probably a fairly small piece of what affects our citywide election. The only crossover we have there is Redwood Shores. So with that, the Sequoia Union High School District and the Redwood City Elementary School District have much more influence on that cost factor. Belmont Redwood Shores is probably negligible somewhere in the percentages of that. One thought that I had was, number one, I'm having some struggle, but I'll let their attorneys figure that out, as to whether two members of a 5-member board could substantially, I guess they could substantially tell you what the two of them are thinking, not constituting a majority. One of the options would be to have the, if there is an intent, and I heard at one point something like an intent to move this on a first reading, we certainly would have that information as part of the second reading. It could be shared and could influence the vote on the second reading. I want to be careful next week with our meeting. I do not intend to agendize this as a significant amount. We have dedicated, we talked about at the State of the City address the importance of the work that the Housing and Human Concerns Committee has been doing on an incredibly critical issue in our community, and that's housing. And currently, and in fact, at the last mayor, vice mayor, we did some house cleaning with next week's agenda to keep it very focused on this incredible issue. And I want to be real careful not to steer away from that, because I want to dedicate as much time to that as possible next week. So I don't know when this would come back if the first reading isn't tonight. We've got extremely full agendas, so we'd have to figure that out. So there is an option to have a first reading tonight, a brief report next week, and then a vote on the second reading is an option that I would just throw out there. And with that, Councilwoman Borgens.
Okay. And I'm sitting here just being, I really respect the fiscal and financial responsibility that I'm hearing. But for me, it's more about, I think this was the first time that the community actually got to hear how the committee came up with their decision, and they need to digest everything they've heard too. And just by the emails we've gotten and the respect that was in these emails, but also the concern and the real pain that I feel our community is feeling right now, I think that this also would give them an opportunity to kind of go and go back and digest what they've heard tonight and how this decision did come to this fruition, how we came up, how the discussion took place up here tonight. It gives them that opportunity. So I really respect that suggestion that maybe we could not vote on this tonight and extend it to another meeting. I do agree that we do have full agendas, but I think that we owe as much of our community and the respect to what the committee's decision was, and then all of what we just said, because we haven't had the opportunity to discuss it with each other, and now we have. So we understand a little more of what's going on. So I really respect that suggestion that was made by Councilmember Mazer.
Sorry, if I could just clarify one more thing, which is, I thought what I heard is if we voted on it tonight and it passed, we couldn't make a substantial revision in the second reading. It would just essentially have to be like a minor tweak if like there was some wording that was incorrect or some sort of technical issue as opposed to anything substantial. Is that, did I understand correctly?
That is accurate. So if we went with, let's say, Mayor Siebert's suggestion was doing a first reading tonight and going forward with a second reading on October 24th, if that failed, you would start the process over again with another first reading and second reading on whatever could be approved by the council.
So just to clarify, and what I was suggesting was something, a report back like, hey, the high school district is definitely going there. And the elementary school district laughed when we asked, we floated the idea of opening back up. No. But I'm just saying, however, if the elementary school district said, hey, you know what? The high school districts may be thinking about doing one of these other options. And if you guys are thinking about that, then maybe we would do it. Potentially what I'm looking at is to bring back enough information that would sway a vote to kill it on the second reading, or essentially the second reading is to reaffirm it. And I would be looking for very substantive information, like one of the votes heard. I mean, if it truly is a 4-3 vote tonight, it only takes one of the four to say, you know what? Now I've heard something that makes me think, no, we got to kill this thing, and it only takes one person switching to kill it, and then we go back at the drawing board, is what I just heard. So I wasn't looking to tweak it; I was looking to reaffirm it or kill it at the second reading, based on information from the school. Because quite frankly, if the school districts come back, I guess I would ask, there's only a couple scenarios that could happen. I would ask those, if you knew for sure tonight that if we were last and the Sequoia Union High School District was in fact going to do that, would that change anybody's opinion? I mean, would that solidify a vote or change a vote?
I'll just say I'm not sure, because I haven't heard the benefit of the school district's thinking, and I'm, maybe it's a rhetorical question, but I'm not convinced they won't change their minds. And if they tell us no, absolutely, we're not going to go a different route other than to extend terms, who knows? That might change my thinking.
Okay,
but I can't say until I hear that.
And others?
I agree. I really am interested in hearing their thought process, since we are behind them in this.
So, and that's what I was getting at, was this, my option allowed us to have a first reading, to get their input and either kill it or reaffirm it and then move on. And because it sounds like what we're looking for is input on what these other agencies are going to do. In the meantime, the email system's not going to be shut down. People still have our phone numbers, and will reach out to us and tell us what they're thinking, whether it's through email or other information. So it's not like public input will stop. Public input at these meetings is not. In fact, most people complain that this is the worst way to give public input. I think you can say a lot more in an email than you can with that way. So I would argue that it continues to move the process forward. I think at some point, for the sake of the agenda tonight, we need to do something. So I'd either be looking for a motion for first reading or a motion to continue the item completely.
Mayor Siebert, I'd like to make a motion to move this item to a future meeting to be determined by the mayor and the vice mayor.
We have a motion, a second. I think just to continue the item to a to be determined date. We'll need to take a vote. Your mic's on. I think that's the one that turns itself on sometimes, so be careful. Serious. Yeah.
Motion carries 4-3 with Mayor Siebert, Councilmember Magide, and Councilmember G opposing. Thank you.
We will bring this up at our next opportunity, the mayor, vice mayor, which is actually Wednesday. And we will look at the tentative calendar and try and figure out a time to bring it back. With that, this item is only continued, and it wasn't a public hearing that was even closed, so none of that matters. With that, we are moving on to item 8B for the citywide transportation plan scope of work. I didn't even have to say it. I was going to provide you the opportunity to leave if you didn't want to talk about transportation, and apparently some of you don't.
Mayor Siebert, I would encourage people to stay for this discussion.
Yes, I was going to say.
This is actually a very important discussion. If you do have to leave, I hope you will tune in at home.
It's exactly the issue that people have been asking us to address for the entire time I've been on the council.
Okay, so with that, we're back to item 8B. I'm going to go back to see the official title of it. I put it somewhere. Where'd it go? Anyways, this is a scoping session on the citywide transportation study. Aaron Acknon, our assistant city manager, will present the staff report, I think a brief staff presentation, and then we'll have some dialogue on it. Just to set, or you're going to set the tone of what this is about, right, and what it's not about. I will let you do that. Carry on. Thank you, Mr. Acknon.
The council, it is, I was talking to the city manager, it is a bit unusual that I'm presenting an item that doesn't have the most public comment out of all the items on the agenda. So, but this is a very important item, and this is an item that came as a result as comments that we received from the community over the last couple years, came as a result of our February 8th study session on managing growth. And this is one of the key initiatives that came out of that. Obviously, the two most talked about discussion topics at the February 8th meeting were housing, that's something we're going to tackle next week, and transportation, that's something that we're looking into tonight. We're also taking a bit of an unusual step in that we're bringing the scope to the council for both public and council comment on the scope before we bring back the actual contract to the council for approval. Usually the scope and the contract is reviewed on the same night, but this is a big item both in financial terms but also in community importance. Just as a backdrop, I think we've all heard more and more complaints about traffic congestion over the past few years, and I think this chart really puts it in perspective, especially the bottom row. As you could see, the amount of traffic congestion that we're feeling as an overall region has gone up and up as the economy has improved. And as you could see, as it bottomed out in 2009, 2010, traffic was about the same as it was back in 1998 before the first dot-com boom. And after 5-6 years of growth in a row, we have unprecedented amount of traffic congestion in the Bay Area. One MTC stat that was in the staff report is that traffic congestion as a measure of commuter delay has increased by about 70% since 2010. So why is this? In San Mateo County, 8.8% unemployment in 2010. We're at a historically low unemployment rate of right around 3% in 2016. And what does this increase in jobs do? Number one, it increases the amount of demand for new development. So obviously with new development, you also have an increased traffic around that new development. But new development really only accounts for about an increase in 5% in overall population, about the same amount in overall office development. We've had about 300,000 square feet come online of office space in the past 16 years, which represents less than 5% of our overall commercial space within Redwood City. So where has most of the growth actually occurred? It's occurred within the existing buildings in Redwood City, both in occupancy rates. So citywide, we had close to a 30% vacancy rate in office back in 2010. Now we have probably around 8% citywide and a lot less in the downtown area. In addition to that, the intensity of uses within the occupied office space and retail space has increased. A restaurant that used to only employ four servers in 2010 during the down economy now employs 10 servers. The amount of customers they receive at those restaurants has also increased significantly. And also one aspect of employment that we don't think about, but actually a lot of complaints that come in to our transportation division as well as our police department has to do with neighborhood employment. So the amount of construction workers within residential neighborhoods increases during an up economy. The number of people who are employed within households increases. The number of household businesses and home occupations increases. And that's a lot of traffic within residential neighborhoods that wasn't there before. Couple that with a 70% increase in Bay Area traffic congestion that we see both on our main thoroughfares and new technology that's come over in the last 6 years that allows people to cut through residential routes that weren't there before to avoid congestion on thoroughfares. And I think the number one complaint that we've heard, a concern that we've heard in our community, other than the housing issues, has been cut through traffic in residential neighborhoods. And I think that's one big issue that we're going to look at tackling in this citywide transportation plan. So once again, this came about in the Managing Growth study session, something that we heard from the community and specific direction that was given to us by the council. The council then put $500,000 in this year's budget to fund this initiative. And we started the consultant selection process in July, where we first did a request for qualifications, sent it out to 19 different transportation firms, received proposals back from about 5 of them, interviewed 3, and we've narrowed it down to Fair and Peers, as well as a number of sub-consultants that Fair and Peers would be using if this contract is approved. So at this point, I will turn it over to Jessica Manzi, who will go over the scope of work, the proposed scope of work, and then turn it over to the council and to the public for comment on that scope of work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm Jessica Manzi, the City's Senior Transportation Coordinator. I'm not going to go over all of the tasks in detail. You have that in your staff report, but I did want to provide a couple of highlights here. There's basically 8 major tasks included in the proposed scope of work, and the cost of those is roughly $500,000, which is the budget that you had allocated for it. Within those tasks, I wanted to focus on 2. The outreach is one area where we're really committed to making sure that we get feedback from as many members of our community as possible. We've identified multiple outreach strategies to do that, but also are looking for your input to see if there's other suggestions to ensure that we're getting that wide range of input that we're expecting. But that outreach includes things from traditional community meetings to having interactive web-based maps, so people that are at home and don't have time to come out to meetings can click on, an intersection where they see problems, where they have a hard time crossing the street, or a segment where people are speeding in front of their house. As well as ensuring that we have bilingual communication, a bilingual website, as well as potentially the option of text updates to, again, get the information about the plan to as many people who are interested in it. And then also task 3 in the existing conditions, as Mr. Acton identified, one of the concerns that we hear consistently is with cut-through traffic and concerns about increased congestion on different roadways. So a big component of the project will be doing establishing or reestablishing baseline conditions for traffic on both arterials and residential streets. And part of that will also include doing some truth testing for recent development projects that have come up, particularly in downtown. The Downtown Precise Plan and other planning documents made certain assumptions about how many trips were going to be made by those projects, and so we'll actually do some data collection now that some of those are open and help see what's happening on the ground and comparing that to what our assumptions were during those planning processes. And let's see. Oh, another note I wanted to make on the transportation demand management piece. I highlighted this in the staff report as well, but we applied for a grant to the City and County Association of Governments that's tied to parking and transportation demand management. The board awarded us that grant this past Friday. So the budget we've presented here is only a very small amount to incorporate the results of that grant work into this project. So we'll be leveraging those funds from CCAG with the funds that have been allocated by the council for this project.
Ms. Manzi, I'm sorry if I missed it. What was the amount of that grant?
$49,000, I believe.
Thank you.
And we identified here just some broad categories that we'd be looking for your input. Obviously, we're welcome to take any comments that you have, but particularly interested in whether you'd like the council communication subcommittee to provide outreach on to provide input on the outreach plan, whether you think it would be useful and beneficial to have a policy advisory group and what that group might be comprised of, or who it might be comprised of, and particularly if there's elements of the scope that you think we should either de-emphasize, emphasize, switch around to make sure that the contents of this plan really address your concerns and priorities as well as those of the community. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, there it is. We have one speaker's card. Before I get to that, and somebody's going to be taking notes, so who will we be talking to? Ms. Manzi? Okay. I'm going to ask the council to do a couple things. We talked about this a little bit at Mayor, Vice Mayor, and please leave this up because I think this is very helpful. And again, we'll get to our speaker's card in a minute. When the first one's probably a yes or no. The second one is probably a yes or no with an idea. On the third one, if you have things you'd like to modify, or if there's things you'd like to comment, too bad we can't split the screen and show that and the elements. But anyways, it'd be helpful, I think, for staff a little bit to hear if something is like an A priority or a B priority for you. I mean, you can say, hey, I'd like to study, whether our signs ought to be a certain color or something, I don't know, or crosswalks ought to be lit. That's really important for me. That's an A or a B, because I think it would what we asked and what the input we provided when we first heard about this presentation tonight was for them to come back potentially with a couple of, a contract, for the consultant to do this, or maybe a little bit more depending on what can be done. So if you want to make everything an A, that's fine. We can kind of wheedle it out then in the future. But so we'll go to our speaker's card, and then I'm just going to go down the line. I'm going to start in the middle and work my way out from Councilmember Bain to Councilwoman Aguirre to Councilwoman Howard and so forth, honoring those that sit on the end, so always not going first, followed by Vice Mayor Bain and then myself. Sure. So, and just, again, we can answer these three questions and provide input. Obviously, this isn't the last time to provide input. But with that, I do have one speaker's card. It is Miss Levin, who I believe is here, and Levine, apologize. Levin?
Yeah.
It is? Oh, man.
Close
right
enough.
The first time.
Either way, but Adina Levin with Friends of Caltrain, and thank you very much for taking this on at the request of the community as one of the most important issues facing the community in terms of transportation. Redwood City has been growing and the region has been growing, and this is really necessary in order to be able to accommodate more people with more convenience. There's a number of really good things about the way that this is being approached. Just a quick step. So Friends of Caltrain supports sustainable transportation on the Peninsula Corridor, and including issues of transportation demand management. And we've been looking at this very closely in what the other cities on the corridor have been doing. And I was actually on the advisory board of the Palo Alto Transportation Management Association in its process of formation. So for background, some of the good things that this is doing is looking at all modes of transportation, having robust community outreach, and looking at how to incorporate the new state law and policy for assessing transportation impact. So a couple of thoughts in terms of the scope. One effective practice that we're starting to see in the area to really focus attention on improving transportation is setting vehicle trip caps and mode share goals, and particularly as it relates to some of the city's planning areas like the downtown area or the El Camino area. Because if you have a goal that really helps focus on how to get there, and so having professional help in assessing that goal is something that's really valuable to do with the professional resources. Another practice that we're starting to see is in terms of the bicycle planning is to work on a low stress network. This is a way of looking at a bike network as, you know, it's not that we have 20 miles of bike lane here and here and here, but how do you have a complete network that lets someone of any age or ability to be able to, you know, get their full route from where they're coming from and where they are going to. In terms of the transportation demand management, one of the things that we would recommend is to look at equitable access. One of the surprises in working with Palo Alto is that they found that commuters who work at tech companies drive less than 40%, but lower income service workers drive at an 80% rate. And there are equity barriers to having more space efficient and sustainable modes. So consider equity in the services to provide. Lastly, so Friends of Caltrain does work on community education about transportation options. We'll happily continue to work on that. And I'm not a Redwood City resident, but if it's appropriate to play any kind of support role based on what we've been doing, we'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Appreciate your input. Thanks for being here tonight. With that, council input, again, the three questions are before you. Council Member G.
All right, Mayor Siebert, thank you. Let me see if I can follow your directions. Item number 1, yes. Item number 2, yes, and that and will be followed by number 3. Is in reviewing the scope of work, I think it's great, but what I'd like to do is see a chapter added about regional, the stuff that happens outside of Redwood City's city limits. You know, when we talk about transportation, transit, traffic, it doesn't end and begin at our city limits. I mean, the most stark project outside of our city limits is right next door to our city limits is the Menlo Gateways project at Marsh Road. And if we don't think that's going to have an impact on our ability to move around in that part of the city, we're going to be very surprised. You know, I just did the quick math. It's about 1 million square feet, not including the 3 parking garages. And when that project was approved by that city, I think it was around 2010, they were just relying on TDM. That was it. And so, you know, when I look up and down from San Francisco to San Jose, I can easily tick off about 20 million square feet of development, and many of those projects don't want housing. We will feel that here in Redwood City, whether it's on 101, 280, El Camino Real. And so I'm not suggesting Redwood City can solve that, but what I am suggesting is that we have a chapter about what happens outside of Redwood City that can impact our ability to move around and mitigate what we're feeling now, because it's only going to get worse if we don't start to think about it. Because those are pretty big numbers, and it covers San Francisco all the way down to San Jose. And a lot of the complaints we hear about are about El Camino Real, about 280, about 101. And there's no way when those projects get built, we won't feel it here in Redwood City.
Thank you. Councilwoman Aguirre.
Thank you. For number 1, yes, I think it'd be great for the Communication Committee to give us input on the outreach. Number 2, Policy Advisory Group. I'd really like to, I like what was in the, about the different groups, Senior Affairs, City Council, Planning Commission, Complete Streets, but I also like to add, I don't see advocates for disabled, pedestrians, children, youth. A lot of our kids are now on skateboards and not tricycles. I forget those scooters and other that I know Too old for tricycles. It's 10 o'clock almost. And I really would like that Complete Streets Committee or to look at that and add that. We have a lot of great advocacy for our cyclists, and we have a lot of great roads. Our kids cannot go on that cycle area. And there's so many schools in the area. So adding that voice of our disabled, when we hear our folks, and disabled are not just our seniors, and there's a lot of folks in our community that want to come to our events downtown, but we don't have the accessibility. So I want to make sure that whatever group, whether it's the seniors, it's Complete Streets, that we add that advocacy for children and youth that can go to these events, that don't have to be dropped off by parents. That I don't know what it means, but I think it goes along the lines with what Councilmember G said, by partnering with our transportation groups that are part of this area. And also under so that's what I want to do for number 2. But number 3, on the to modify the elements of the scope, the only thing that I'd like to see is I want to have some clear and measurable outcomes. What do we expect to have when all of this work is done and all of these groups meet together? I want to make sure that that's very clear in the committee, and I really like the way it was laid out and the goals that they have. But I want to make sure that it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do at the end of this plan?
Great. Councilwoman Howard, and then Councilwoman Borgens after that.
Thank you. Mr. Ackman, I had a question. I see that the terms for traffic analysis have changed from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. Could you explain to me, because as far as I know, it's always been LOS, which was truly ineffective because the highest and most dense and congested was, I believe, an E or an F, and didn't matter how much worse it got after that, it always stayed there. So you never had true analysis of what the problem was. So vehicle miles traveled, do you feel this is a benefit and will more accurately represent the congestion that's going on?
I'll give a short answer and then turn it over to Jessica. The short answer is that we are going to have to move to that because there are state laws that are changing for certain areas to actually show what the impact of our land use decisions are on how people actually travel, rather than just focusing on hyper-local traffic activity and how that impacts intersections. So I'll turn it over to Jessica now to give a more detailed answer.
So that's a great question, and it could be a really long answer. I'll try to summarize as best I can. But as Mr. Ackman alluded to, the state has eliminated level of service as the standard for identifying traffic impacts for CEQA environmental analyses. Currently, it's in the process of identifying an alternative to that, and what they've presented so far has been vehicle miles traveled. And what this does is it really takes a more regional perspective, a more holistic perspective on the impacts of projects. As an example, if, so we have the first residential project downtown was 201 Marshall. The 100 and some odd units that are there, the analysis would be looking at how many miles are the residents of that building going to be contributing to the roadways as they're, for the most part, going to and from work at that location. A lot of those people, or at least a good fraction of those, might be choosing to ride on the train, and so they would be generating less traffic than, say, a new housing development in Gilroy, where people are living in houses and then commuting into the Bay Area. And so it better reflects the distances that people are traveling, going about their daily trips, rather than simply looking at the impacts of those trips immediately adjacent to specific projects. But we can come back and talk more about that, because it will be definitely part of this planning process, and something that the council will need to think about how we'll incorporate that into our traffic impact analyses going forward.
Well, it certainly sounds like an improvement over what we've been doing for all these years, so I'm glad, and thank you for the explanation. I'm sure as we go forward we'll get more information on what this means for the community. Let me see here. I'll try to stick to the questions for the mayor, too. The first one, Council Communications Committee. I would love to have them involved in the outreach program as much as possible. First of all, council members sometimes have information going on out in the community that staff doesn't necessarily have. And this sharing of information may be able to help us and alert us to possible red flags or problems to encounter. And I think having the communications committee involved would be very useful as we go forward in making sure we try to reach as many people as possible. Farm Hill Boulevard comes to mind, where maybe we could have had a different start date and had better outcomes at that point. So this is an opportunity to learn from that and include them on the process. Number 2, Policy Advisory Group. I am in favor of it. I like the members mentioned, Complete Streets, Planning Commission, and City Council. I think that would be a wonderful group to have on board, because some of these groups are already working on some of these issues, and to be part of the sharing of information and running these things by the advisory group will help everyone. As many people who can be on the same page as possible at the same time is going to be useful to all of us. And I'll just put a plug in. I'd love to serve on that committee. I'm very interested in transportation issues. Number 3, modify elements of the scope. First of all, I'd like to be sure under baseline conditions that we discover if streets that weren't major arterials or major roads have suddenly, just because of cut-through traffic, become that, because of the sheer numbers that go through the streets. And so I'd like to be sure that we include that information in our reporting. Alameda and Hopkins, I think Alameda already is a major arterial, but Hopkins, for instance, and other streets suddenly have become so frequented because of people cutting through and trying to find shortcuts. So I think we need to be aware that it's not going to be the same arterials in major streets as we had in the past. And we may need to make changes in that regard as to how we address the issues in on those streets. The Grand Boulevard Initiative has been gathering information for quite some time, bringing it back to our group, and from other countries and cities and counties on best practices in dealing with transportation and parking. I hope that we will utilize their information, because every time I go to their meetings, I learn something new that we could bring back to our city and possibly utilize. And most recently, they presented information that was really useful. I won't go into it now, but it's easy enough. We'll get the information. But I think we should utilize what other cities and countries and counties are doing. So this way, when we go forward, we're not just starting from scratch. I didn't see water transit mentioned, and I know that we don't have water transit at this time. We have a private operator. However, the discussions have started with our city and several other partners, and we hope to initiate it. So I'd like to have it at least included in the conversation when we're talking about transportation, and unless I missed it in the report, but I don't think so, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
You didn't miss it, but it is something that we have discussed, and I think it would be of particular importance when we look at our transportation demand management policies, because that is another key way that we could get people out of their car if it's promoted effectively, and if there are requirements. There's a number of things that we could do, so we agree that should be something that's studied.
And again, keep people who are involved in the water transit in the loop, so that as things change or decisions are made, we can bring that back to the group.
Absolutely.
To add to the report. And lastly, I agree with Council Member G about regional issues in and around our community, making sure that we don't stay insulated, that there are things that are going to cross through and around our community that will impact us, and that we be sure we don't fail to recognize that. And thank you for a very good report, and I look forward to this getting started. Thank you.
Councilwoman Borgens.
Item 1, yes. Policy Advisor Group, if we could add neighborhood associations to that. I saw where it said school groups. Does that mean schools? I like to see schools involved with this discussion. That's both elementary, high schools, and the college. and possibly input from the Park and Rec. I don't know if they need to actually be in that group, but really good input from our Park and Rec department because they do deal with so many youth programs that are all around town and that. And I saw it was mentioned in the report about shuttle, current employee shuttles, and might be interested to look and see how we can have a citywide shuttle. I might have missed that. And then I saw where it talked about street designs and sidewalks, and really important for me is if we're going to look at that, the potential of putting in lit crossings. If that's something that is part of the study, I'd like to see the potential of putting in crosswalks that have that potential of, like we have on Jefferson, you hit the button, the light, it lights up, and you cross. So that would be the other. And then I think that answers all three.
Great. Councilwoman Mazur.
So, yes, I'll just add my voice to the Communications Committee. And on the Policy Advisory Group, I would ask that we also make sure we include the El Camino Real Committee that we have right now. And then, in addition to schools, it would be great if we had, John, I was thinking about the young man that we met with a few months ago who asked how students could get involved in Redwood City.
Yeah.
And so it would be great if we could maybe work with the high schools, and I'm happy to bring this up at the meeting tomorrow to see if we could have a high school
that'd be
student.
great. It's more the student government, I think. It was like
right.
student government.
Yeah. So I'm happy to bring that up at the committee tomorrow and ask if they could help us work with student governments to identify one or two, preferably two, because if you're the only young person sitting on a committee, it's not good. And really appreciate the inclusion of the disabled community. So thank you for thinking about that, Councilmember Aguirre. And then the only other thing I would add is on existing transportation conditions, it talks about networks, including a review of recent development projects. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about both built and proposed, that those are both included. And then we have all these other and this is sort of what spurred this conversation to begin with, we have all these current planning efforts and assessments right around the potential streetcar and all these other different plans. So in addition to the regional look, which I completely agree with, also some very clear focus on how are we going to fold in all this other disparate planning efforts that we've had underway into a cohesive plan for the city.
Through the mayor.
But yep.
If I could answer one question regarding the taking a look at existing developments. What we were planning to do is actually go out there and physically count cars coming out the most recently approved development projects to compare the traffic, how people are getting there, but from a pedestrian standpoint, bike standpoint, auto standpoint, so that we could take those and then apply those numbers for a more accurate figure going forward rather than just using industry standards. So almost audit what we've done in the past so we could apply that going forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Bain.
Yeah, this is awesome. So first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that you guys are bringing forward this recommendation is fantastic news, and the recognition that land use and transportation are inextricably tied together. And so I'm very glad that we're doing this conversation now, and I cannot wait to see what comes back from this study. A couple things that were said tonight, reestablishing baselines and truth testing are super important, because I think it will help reinforce some things that we're hearing, and it will completely debunk some other things that we're hearing in the community. And I think that that's very, very important information for us to have. Personally, I feel like most of the traffic impact that we're seeing is because of the economy. And as was mentioned, not only do we have a lot of construction workers and contractors and others who are bringing trucks and equipment into the city, but we also have the displacement issue. I appreciate what Ms. Levin said about how lower wage workers are driving 80% of the time as opposed to the tech workers who are driving 40% of the time. That's important information to bring to light. I think the overarching goal of this project should be to help get people out of their cars and give them different ways to get around, not only between communities, as Councilmember G said, this is a regional issue, but within Redwood City. I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is, how do we get people in and out of our city efficiently, preferably without cars? And how do we get people around the city to do the things that they want to do? I support some of the comments that were made about shuttles. As part of the recommendations, I want to see where could shuttles supplement Samtrans to get people in and out of the community? Where could shuttles help to get residents to where they want to be? For example, downtown on a Friday night for a concert. Could people instead park at a Kmart lot and have a shuttle that takes them in and around to the restaurants, and then they know when they can catch it to go back to their car? That could alleviate some of the downtown parking problem that we have. I strongly support, and this is the number one priority for me, the pedestrian safety improvements. I would like to come out of this with a list of the most dangerous intersections in Redwood City for pedestrians to cross. And I think we've heard anecdotally what some of them are. I know we've had a lot of discussion about Goodwin and Alameda, where the kids are crossing to go to Kennedy. Even on Jefferson, I remember somebody came here and talked about the Jefferson crossing where the kids cross from Sequoia. And I'd made a suggestion to our staff that we consider changing those lights from yellow to red, which would actually be consistent with the new pedestrian crossing that just went up in Atherton. So those are the kinds of things I think we should consider. Woodside Road. We had, several years back, we had a lot of pedestrian deaths on Woodside Road. Thankfully, we haven't seen that lately. But Oxford and Orchard are right next to each other, and they're a dangerous place to cross. We heard that a lot as many of us walked precincts and talked to people in those neighborhoods. So those are a couple of specific things I would like to have come out of this. I agree wholeheartedly the Communications Committee can provide some good, sound advice to staff on how we do outreach around this. I think it'll be well received, but we can also help avoid some of the pitfalls. Policy Advisory Group, absolutely. I support Councilmember G's suggestion that we look at people not just within the city limits, but people who live outside the city limits who have a vested interest in us, particularly if they have some policy expertise or some specific recommendations they can make on how we move forward. And I hope that at the end of this we'll have a list of projects we can pick from. I know there will be costs associated with those, along with some recommendations on what we could do to fund them. And then I think that could lead to a very good discussion that we have with developers, with members of the community, and others about how we move forward on this. Thank you again.
I believe there's a question.
Thank you, Mayor Seaver. Vice Mayor Bain, thank you for your comments. I just have a question. I mean, you mentioned about baselining and truth testing, and maybe perhaps there might be some debunking. Do you feel there might be a need for a peer review just to deal with those that may not believe that, if staff's out there counting cars coming out of a garage, do you feel there might be a need to have some peer review to at least have a different set of eyes validate that they counted 10 cars coming out of the garage at 8 o'clock in the morning, or do we need to go that far? Or I'm just, no matter what's going to happen, given some of the flavor of the comments, there are going to be a certain part of the community that just doesn't believe anything that comes out of this report. So I'm just rather be proactive about it rather than be reactive to it.
I don't think I can personally answer that question at this time. What I would like to understand a little bit better is the methodology. So, counting cars during peak hours is different from counting cars in the middle of the day. So I don't know that we need to have a discussion on that. I would like to just get an update from our staff in terms of here's how we intend to have this play out. And if we have questions like that, we think that there does need to be a second set of eyes, we bubble it up to a discussion.
And perhaps that's something actually the Communications Committee would like to weigh on when we talk about outreach, because maybe there could be opportunities for people to volunteer who would like to see this in action. And I don't think it probably takes a lot of training to count cars. I mean, you have to do it at the right time in the right way, but we could probably take people to.
You gotta have a lot of
train
fingers
them.
and toes and stuff.
What's that?
You have a lot of fingers and toes.
Exactly. But it's a way to be engaged, and it's a different way to be engaged, and it could be helpful on both fronts, both with fact checking, but also with involvement in a different way.
Good. Okay. I'm going to answer the questions that I said everybody had to answer. One, yes. Appreciate their volunteering for that. That's a joke. On the policy advisory group, I'm going to take a little bit different spin, sure, but I want to know up front really clearly what they're to do and what they're not to do. I've seen them work really well. I think as clear as we were on the El Camino Real corridor study plan and putting that group together, I think we did a really good job of telling them what they were about and what they weren't about. Because I've also seen these groups not intentionally but unintentionally diminish input. Because if you're not in the group, then you don't give input into the process. So I want to make sure that this group, that we're really clear with what their scope is part of the process. Here's some, I heard some and I'm going to repeat some, but here's a couple of I'm more interested in who they're going to go out and talk to. And here's some of the groups that I want to make sure we're talking to. Public safety. Make sure we're talking to our command staff at our police department, fire department in this process. Want to make sure we're talking to our business groups, the Chamber, SAMCETA, the RCIA, Downtown Business Group, other business groups. Want to make sure that we're talking to the people. Ms. Levin mentioned the issue of the people that are not riding transit. I want to make sure we're talking to the people that are not currently riding transit. I'm always struck when we go out and we want to. I'm not saying transit does this. I don't want to pick on anybody, but we want to we want to talk to people about the library. So we go to the library and talk to people. That's great. They're at the library. I'm pretty sure they know where it is and what's going on. I'd rather talk to people that aren't at the library and why they're not there. So I'd like to find a way to talk to this. I think we've got to look at how do we encourage as a city. It's interesting. I keep hearing about shuttles. I heard a very interesting idea today about partnerships with groups that you wouldn't think that people were going to be partnering with, and that's Lyft, Uber, Zoom, which is kind of a Lyft Uber model for children. There's a lot of those out there. We need to be talking to them. I kind of wonder if there isn't something built into, should we be running a shuttle, or should we find a way that the city can encourage more people to use Lyft, Uber, Zoom to get around the city? Because they tend to, especially the way they're starting to pool rides and carpool. So I think we need to be talking to those. There's a whole list of companies that I'm working with and talking to right now that are doing carpool apps. Basically, all they do is, the hardest thing about a carpool is to put it together. Once it's going, it works, and there's companies out there doing that. So I think we need to be talking to them. I think those are some of the creative things we need to talk about. Completely agree about pedestrian safety. It's huge. We don't. The cost of it, irregardless of the tragedy that it is, the cost of it, not only to human life, but just the cost of going through that is enormous, and we need to continue to look at that. And then two other words that were mentioned that I think are worth repeating by me, and that's one, deliverables. What do we do at the end of this? What do we get to pick from? What do we get to buy at the end of this? A shopping list of things that we can implement. And two, I agree with the methodology. They're going to be naysayers about everything, but I think the answer as far as we need to go is just really good, sound methodology in that. So I'm excited. This is something we said we'd be coming. I am, a comment. I'm going to attribute it to Vice Mayor Bain. I think others said it, but he was sitting closest to me. This strikes me as the same type of thing. If you really want your elected officials to really mess up your city, have them drive it into bankruptcy, and yet no one's ever here at budget time and discussion. I don't go a day without hearing how horrible transportation is, and yet there's a smattering of you in the audience. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that you know that. But if this is really important to the community, I had wished the crowd had been reversed, because this lives on much longer than who sits here. And it is interesting. So I hope the community will hear this and will get out and be excited about this work that's going to be done. This is to some degree unprecedented, as I've heard from others in terms of this, and even talked to some colleagues in other cities about the scope that we're taking on this transportation plan citywide. I think it's to some degree unprecedented. So thank you for that, and look forward to having that. A contract will come back to us in a few weeks.
Yep.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. With that, we move on to a series of matters of commission interest. I'm going to start with a couple. I also wanted to say this with more people here, and I touched on it earlier, but now I'm going to kind of preach to the choir. you know, what we do, it goes without saying, that is the tip of the iceberg. And I appreciate that tonight. I just want to congratulate Councilwoman Aguirre and Councilwoman Mazur for their new positions in the Executive Committee of the Peninsula Division of the League of California Cities. Councilwoman Member Aguirre, we can now call her Madam President of the Peninsula Division. I think that's wonderful. If you can help us bring back the bocce ball trophy, that'd even be better. Perhaps just steal it and we'll engrave our own name on it. That's fine. And Councilwoman Mazur, thank you for serving as the at-large from the San Mateo County Representative. I think it's great leadership. It puts us in a great position regionally, so thank you for doing that. Yes. Thank you. With that, a couple committee reports we have listed. I would ask my colleague, Council Member G, to talk about the city-owned property ad hoc and the Woodside 101 Woodside Road Council Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mayor Siebert. And let me start with the city-owned ad hoc property committee. We approved an amendment to Management Partners, who's been working with staff on trying to inventory our city-owned parcels throughout. And they range from bits and pieces that we got rid of through consent in some places, and they include some lots. And so in meeting with staff, they recommended that we bring to council a couple lots, one that was purchased with redevelopment funds when we had them, which then will be declared surplus property, and our nonprofits will be given the first opportunity because of what it was bought for and what kind of money it was bought for. And another property will just be declared surplus, or I think the official term is non-essential. And that'll be brought forward for council for action sometime later this year. And then we get to decide where to deposit those funds, and the ad hoc committee suggested into our housing funds, I think, in both cases. With regard to 101 Woodside, I think Mayor Siebert concluded his comments very appropriately. It's kind of disappointing to see very few people here. Hopefully a lot more people are at home having a glass of wine and paying attention. But progress is being made on Woodside 101. By the end of this year, we should have the EIS documents all cleared and environmentally approved. The next step is then to secure funding, probably from the San Mateo County TA, as well as some local matching funds, to begin the next step of engineering work as well as right-of-way. The challenge, though, that we will have is that we've taken off the calendar when this project will go into construction and completion. And that really comes down to what Mayor Siebert said earlier: where's the money? As you know, the state legislature, while they imposed SB 415 on us and amongst other things, they've also struggled to come together with a funding plan for transportation and infrastructure. They've had 2 years of extraordinary sessions and no money. Beyond that, there's no appetite for increasing or changing the gas tax. And by formula, the excise tax on gas was decreased this year. The consequences of that is that $1 billion in transportation funds for Caltrans has been lost and defunded. So we need to find, as a council, roughly $50 million, and that number will go up the longer time passes, to really consider when we're going to go into construction and finish this project. And so the mayor, in talking with our city manager, will probably bring this up in our capital improvement discussion early next year. And if this truly is a community priority, if this truly is a council priority, we need to think about how we're going to help pay for it, because the federal government, depending on what happens in November, is going to probably be reducing funding. State government hasn't figured it out. And we've seen just in this November election many more local transportation bonds. So whether it be a countywide transportation bond, a city bond, community benefits, a GID, SID, whatever alphabet soup you want to come up with, if this truly is a community priority and a council priority, we better put on our thinking caps on how to figure out how to fund it. Otherwise, this project is going to keep drifting until someone somewhere figures out how to fund our transportation and infrastructure projects. And that's just the sad part about it. I know, Councilmember Gide, you on MTC, you're looking at how to get funds for the region. We are looking at San Mateo also, the transit district. But whether it be MTC or Samtrans, it is at the local level now and not at the state and federal level, and that's just the hard part. We've got to figure out how to fund, and there's no one answer. It may be a combination of all the above. So I think that is coming back in our CIP discussion early next year.
Finance and Audit Committee, Vice Mayor Bain.
Thank you. We looked at a couple of things in our last committee. One was how to fund creation of below-market units, including billing into developer projects, our in lieu fees, even tapping into HART sources. So we'll have a report that'll come for our next meeting in terms of just the different ways that that affordable housing creation can happen in our community. The other thing we talked about was refinancing of bonds, so I won't spend any time talking about that since it'll be in your report. A couple other things I'd just like to give some quick updates on. Yesterday I had the opportunity to attend a Girl Scout award ceremony where we gave bronze awards to 3 troops who did great projects here in our community. And the silver award to Kendall Johnston. I wanted to congratulate her. That was a very nice ceremony, and former Mayor Barbara Pierce, also a former Girl Scout and Girl Scout troop leader, was there giving the girls some words of inspiration. That was great. The Heron dedication. So if you haven't heard, we have a great new piece of public art down at the port. I had an opportunity to take part in that unveiling ceremony. Again, kids from Adelante School were there to take part in that, as well as several commissioners, port commissioners, planning commissioners, civic cultural commissioners, senior affairs commissioners. A lot of people were there to welcome this great new edition of public art. So if you have a chance, go down to the port. You can't miss it. And then finally, I was at the ribbon cutting for Pizza and Pints, which, if you're not familiar, is the reincarnation of Pizza and Pipes that many of us here in Redwood City grew up with. It's been cleaned up. It looks much better, and the food is really good. I had an opportunity to try it, so if you have a chance, go down and check it out. Nice family-oriented business in our downtown.
I think next time we have pizza as a council for dinner, City Clerk Vonderland, next time we have pizza for dinner as a council, maybe we'll do the pizza part. I wish we could do the pints part too, but make for a fun meeting.
So noted, Mayor.
Other committee report, Councilmember G.
I just wanted to report that early this month, several of us attended the California League of Cities annual conference. Councilmember Mazer, I know, our city manager was there, our city attorney, and Councilmember Gideon. I just want to thank also Councilmember Gideon for her leadership as president of the Latino Caucus for 2 years. She passed the gavel, and she did a great job in leading that organization and just did a spectacular job and just got a different gavel at the same meeting last at the League of California Cities. So congratulations and thank you.
Councilwoman Gideon. Talking
about transportation, thank you, Councilmember G. Transportation, I'd like to invite folks to a San Mateo 101 Managed Lanes project. It's a public scoping meeting and open house. That is Thursday, October 22nd at 6 o'clock at the San Mateo City Hall. Goals are to reduce congestion in the corridor, improve travel time, all the things we've been talking about. But as part of the CMEC committee, we are urged to share this, and also as chair of CCAG, we are urged to share this information so folks can go and go to the public scoping meeting. I'll repeat that. It's October 27th at 8 o'clock at the San Mateo City Hall.
Great. City managers, that is all I have. City managers report, please. Sorry.
2 very brief items. Just to let you know, we had about 2 inches of rain over the weekend, but fortunately, as you probably experienced, it was pretty spread out. And so we didn't actually have any serious flooding. We had a little bit of ponding in a few locations and a little debris to clean up this week, but no serious flooding issues. And we appreciate our Public Works and Fire and other staff who assisted over the course of the weekend. Also want to give a shout out to our city staff who are helping raise funds for the American Heart Association. And this Thursday is the Heart Walk at lunchtime at Redwood Shores. This being my first experience with it, I've been blown away by the creativity of our employees to find ways to raise funds, raise energy, really come forward to really support efforts to help prevent heart disease and address those issues. So kudos to city staff, and I'm sure I'll see some of you there on Thursday.
Great. And City Attorney Ramirez.
Nothing to report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman.
I just wanted to report that our city council team contributed 100%, and so and broke our goal to reach. So thank you, Council Member G. I only twisted your arm under the table here, but I'll be walking on Thursday and thinking of all of you and supporting the American Heart Association. Our city's really been wonderful with all the fundraising going on throughout the city, above and beyond the normal scope of work that they do. And I just very appreciative. American Heart Association has touched so many in our Redwood City community, and it's a chance for us to give back to the work that they do to prevent heart issues in our community. So thank you very much to our council. 100%. Thank you.
Jeff's arm will be all right after a while.
You know a doctor?
No, yeah. No, gonna have to have the left arm twisted walk. Tonight we're going to be adjourning in memory of Steve Cambatellati. Julian Stephen Cambatellati Jr. passed away, there he is, peacefully at his home of 60 years. Steve to his family and friends. He was born to Evelyn Porter and Julian Cambatellati Sr. A lifelong resident of the Bay Area, Steve grew up on his family's farm in San Mateo. Imagine that, a farm in San Mateo. And moved to Belmont as a child. He attended Belmont Grammar School, Sequoia High School, and San Mateo Junior College. At Sequoia, he played football, basketball, baseball, earning his varsity letter in all three sports. In January 1943, he turned 18 and was drafted by the Army. He proudly served in the 104th Infantry Division, 414th Regiment H Company. He was wounded in combat. He then recovered and was reassigned to the 2nd Battalion until May of 1946. Steve married Jernice Granger in July 1955 in Redwood City. They were active in many organizations. Jernice's father, Floyd Granger, was former mayor of Redwood City. He joined Claude Michael Incorporated to develop distribution for the production supply requirements for the pre-Silicon Valley. After Claude Michael Incorporated was sold, Steve founded ComKyle Incorporated in 1969. He grew the company for over 30 years to include 6 branch offices which distributed assembly, hand tools, and production supplies to the western states. ComKyle was very much an extension of the family, with many direct family members and employees working together as his extended family. Steve retired and sold the company in 1998. Steve will always be remembered for being a family man, his athletic abilities, his enjoyment of his friends, and the activities they shared. You could find him golfing, traveling, raising his dogs, watching the San Francisco Giants. He had an affection for people, and his passion and hobby were people. Scheduling meals or meetings with friends from grammar school, military service, community activities, and of course work. He was well respected by those who shared time with him. After retirement, Steve continued to stay active with the American Legion and his Army group, the Timberwolves, as well as many other community organizations. Steve is predeceased by his wife Jernice in 1991. He is survived by his 2 daughters, Carol Patton and Donna Penna, who many of us know, Gary Penna's wife. Steve Penna's sister-in-law. I'm just getting there to all the connections. His 6 grandchildren, Darla Martin, her husband John, Julie Alter, her husband Bruce, Jamie Patton, Lindsay Patton, Nick Penna, Casey Penna, and 1 great-grandson, Jake Martin. A private gathering was held on Tuesday, September 6th at Alta Mesa Memorial Park. In lieu of flowers, the family requests that donations in Steve's name be made to the American Legion Post 105, 651 El Camino Real, Redwood City, or the Sequoia Alumni Association. So with that, it is my pleasure and my honor to suggest that and to make a motion to adjourn the meeting in memory of Steve Cambatellati.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.